Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Goffstown School Board meeting. I call this meeting to order at 7:02. If we can rise and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before we go any further, I would like to recognize that we have 3 board members on the phone. We have Dan Cloutier, Retta Chaffee, and Janelle O'Brien. When I say your name, please say if you're here and if you're alone or not. Dan Cloutier?
I am here. I am alone.
Thank you. Retta Chaffee?
I am here and I'm alone.
Janelle O'Brien?
I'm here and alone at the moment.
Thank you. And we are going to first have our public hearing pursuant to RSA 195-A36. The Goffstown School Board will be holding a public hearing on Monday, November 15th, 2021 at 7 p.m. in the Goffstown High School Library, located at 27 Wallace Road, Goffstown, New Hampshire, to accept public input on the SAU 19 area agreement between Goffstown and New Boston school districts. Any person with a disability needing reasonable accommodations is asked to call the SAU 19 Central Office at 497-4818, extension 5758, at least 72 hours in advance for arrangements. So we're going to start with our public hearing. Scott, Brian?
So just as a quick introduction, this presentation, we did the same presentation with a public hearing in New Boston last week on Wednesday, and this is the second of the 2 scheduled public hearings. Mr. Gross is going to go through a presentation and give a little bit of a historical overview, but just to let members of the public know, this is pertaining to the area agreement that has existed with the community of New Boston since 1971, and we are looking to put a 10-year extension on the ballot in front of voters in March. So Mr. Gross is going to give a little presentation. We do have handouts. And Scott, is this presentation on the website? So if anyone was so inclined, they're able to go see the presentation themselves.
Yeah, so on the website is this presentation. You'll also find a final draft copy as well with the appendices. So
Great.
all right, so we're going to follow along with your paper copy, and as we'll start off with the history of the area agreement, which is your second slide. And for those of you who did not know, area stands for Authorized Regional Enrollment Area. And as the superintendent mentioned, for this agreement's been in place between New Boston and Goffstown for 50 years, so it's pretty substantial. So the big question for those who are maybe new to the community or who may not know, like, what is the benefit to this area agreement for both communities? Well, it provides a collective assurance that students in grades 7 through 12 will be provided a well-rounded educational experience at an affordable cost to taxpayers. New Boston does not have a middle school, nor does it have a high school, so they tuition their students to Mountain View Middle School in grades 7 and 8, and then Goffstown High School in grades 9 through 12. So New Boston pays tuition payments to Goffstown, and in doing so, they don't have to incur capital and operational expenses of having their own middle and high school. And then Goffstown, for their benefit, they receive tuition revenues from New Boston that helps offset a lot of their operational and capital costs. So it's a good relationship between both communities. Most importantly, why is this good for students? And it's pretty safe to say that individually, both Goffstown and New Boston would be quite limited in terms of their ability to offer and to sustain many academic and co-curricular programs. And I say that because if you take a look at a lot of our, like our academics, for an example, because we have both New Boston and Goffstown students, we're able to offer a wide array of advanced placement courses. We're able to have a wide array of co-curricular athletic experiences. And for those of our students who have, whether they've performed on stage or performed on the athletic field, most of the people or the students, their fellow students, come from both communities. And as an aside, I think we would be in trouble on the football teams. I don't think we'd have a quarterback for the last 5 out of 6 years. So obviously, whether it be musical performances, students from both communities have earned a lot of honors in state competitions, as well as, garnered state championships, and just a lot of high-quality theater and music programs. So what's included in the area agreement? So in that final draft, what I'm going to go over with you, these are the subcategories that you'll see within this area agreement. The parties are obviously Goffstown and New Boston. About 10 years ago, Dunbarton was also included, but they have since left. The quality of education is another component. Tuition calculations is 3 to 4 pages long. Always, that's where the focus seems to be on the money, right? Special education responsibilities. In that section, it states what town is responsible for what types of special ed services. State aid is another category. The curriculum. Transitional programs, what that is essentially the transition from New Boston Central School to Mountain View Middle School. That's the transitional program there. And a lot of that was added in the prior area agreement. Joint area board meetings. There are a couple of meetings a year in which both of these boards get together to discuss the area and any concerns that it may have. New this year is a category called joint resources, and this was just an acknowledgement that both communities share IT database support, just a wide array of just different responsibilities within food service, et cetera. So there's a lot of joint resources that are shared between the two communities, and it kind of goes both ways. School board communication, participation, and communication. Right now, the New Boston School Board has a seat on the standing committees. The Curriculum Education Committee is one. And they're also involved in a lot of other things because obviously their students, their middle school and high school students attend Goffstown schools. So that's a nice manner in which they participate. Documentation and reports, there's a couple of revisions in this area, in this particular category this time around. And this is just to make sure that New Boston receives the needed reports and documents that are needed to ensure that their students are getting a quality educational experience. Accountability is another topic. Withdrawal and termination. We have made, and this board asked for additional language with respect to withdrawal and termination with regard to bonds. And that was an outgrowth of what happened 10 years ago with with Dunbarton leaving. Dispute resolution, and then finally the term, and the term of this agreement is an additional 10 years. So each of these agreements has been for 10, and just so this board knows and the public knows, you can make them longer, but it's been 10 years. Our next slide deals with the renewal process. So both boards independently reviewed the area agreement and consulted with their respective legal counsel for potential language changes. Representatives from each school board met several times last year to review the current area agreement and propose language changes. The proposed changes to the area agreement were agreed upon by both school boards, and public hearings are to be conducted in both communities. So New Boston did their public hearing last week, and we're holding ours right now in Goffstown. And then both communities, if they agree, would place the area agreement renewal on their respective warrants for voter approval in March of 2022. The current term, again, is a 10-year term, and the proposed extension is also 10 years. So what were some of the changes made to the area agreement? The first was in the quality of education, and the current language states that both Mountain View Middle School and Goffstown High School must be accredited schools through the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and that, but what was slightly changed was that not only does Mountain View and the high school need to be accredited, but there's also a requirement the receiving district needs to review its plan to address any NES&C recommendations with the sending district through the C&E committee, which is our Curriculum and Education Committee. So if there were to be any recommendations that came out of that NES&C process, those would be reviewed at C&E, and New Boston, their rep would have the ability to ask questions at that time. The next was that the receiving district is currently is to provide copies of policies and handbooks. And on that one, we just wanted to acknowledge that in the past, we provide a physical paper copy, but now the language is changing, saying that we're going to make our policies and our handbooks available on our website. So Caleb, we've talked about, do students actually take that handbook, et cetera, that physical paper? A lot of times they look at it on their phone. And then the last one was clarification that extended school year, or ESY services that are provided to the general special education population are included in the tuition charges without any additional charges. So if services are provided to Goffstown kids to the general special ed population, then there is no charge to New Boston. The only time that there are specific charges to New Boston if there's a one-on-one para-educator that is with a New Boston child. Those then would get removed, and those would be billed directly to New Boston. The next slide is tuition. And currently, we have a very detailed formulas or Excel spreadsheets that specify how the tuition is calculated. And currently, that rental charge was 2%, which was based upon the appraised value of the receiving district's applicable schools, which would be Mountain View and the high school, with appraisals done every 5 years. There were no changes in the proposed area agreement with respect to the tuition calculations and the Excel spreadsheets. However, the rental charge was restored back to the 2.5% that it was 10 years ago when Dunbarton was also included in the area. So that's important in the sense that this was what was in place, and then it was dropped to 2% because there was the issue that Dunbarton might leave, and I think both boards recognized that 2.5% rental was a fair amount. And again, appraisals will still be done every 5 years. A couple more changes to the area agreement in terms of transition. We talked a little bit before about students who transition from New Boston Central School to Mountain View Middle School. And over the last couple of years with COVID-19, even though our area agreement talks about having physical, step-up days and tours, et cetera, we couldn't do that, during COVID. So there was an acknowledgement there that when there are extenuating circumstances, both school boards, both school districts will work together collaboratively to figure out a way to have the best transition possible for New Boston Central sixth graders entering seventh grade at Mountain View. Joint resources, I'm going to read this new language to you. The districts have an interest, where practical, in the shared utilization of resources such as facilities, food service, technology services, and student information system administration. It is the intent of the parties to maximize the efficiency of any such operations, to reduce total cost with a fair allocation of expense for the relevant service paid by the respective districts. So in that case, we'll give you one example of that. We have had on occasion, we have sent facilities folks who are Goffstown employees to help out in New Boston. It could simply be because people were out on an extended leave, and then Goffstown would bill New Boston for those services. On the flip side, Goffstown High School Performing Arts, I think it was a summer musical. They were doing renovations here at the high school, and that summer program was done at New Boston Central School in their gym, all their practices and everything. So there is an acknowledgement that it's a two-way street, and when one community does help out another, and there's something tangible there that it should be billed, then it is billed by the business office. So again, that would be facilities, food service, technology, and then our student information system, that's our database administration. Another slight change was with respect to documentation and reports. I'm going to read the revised language to you. The following categories of reports/records, to the extent the reports, records, and other data are readily available in the described form, shall be provided by the receiving district to the sending school board at the sending district's request. And there are 5 pretty overarching categories: academic achievement, student demographics, class size, at-risk students, and then the 5 is kind of a catch-all: other student-related reports, records, or data necessary to evaluate school programs. So, short story on this one is that if New Boston asks for data with respect to evaluating school programs, if it's in a readily available format, something that's not going to take the SAU a tremendous amount of time, we're going to make that available to them at their request. It's pretty simple, and it's standard practice. We are already doing that. This one is of interest to the Goffstown community, and that has to do with termination and the expiration of the contract. And I mentioned before, 10 years ago, we had 3 communities in the area: New Boston, Goffstown, and Dunbarton. And towards the end of that agreement, Dunbarton eventually left that area, the area. And with that, they challenged the legality of whether or not they still owed payments on the Goffstown High School bond, their share of those payments. I believe that this board, some of you were on the board at the time, they felt that the statutory language was in Goffstown's favor. They felt that because Goffstown had to essentially warn both communities in the area that they were putting forward a bond 20 years ago and allow them at that time to withdraw from the area, that at that time they had a legal obligation to continue payments on a bond. Well, that case went all the way to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and Goffstown did not prevail. And Dunbarton did not owe their share of remaining principal and interest on that particular bond. The change in the language in this current area agreement that's being proposed is that should New Boston leave, and there still are remaining years left on a bond or another financial debt instrument, that New Boston would owe principal and interest charges for the balance of that particular term, whether it be a bond or another financial obligation, for their proportionate share, which the language in this proposal states is based upon their proportion of the students of that particular school in the final year that they were still within Goffstown School. So, as an example, if there was a bond at Goffstown High School and New Boston were to leave, if they had 20% of the students in that final year, then they would be responsible for 20% of the principal and interest charges until that bond is paid off. And that, again, both communities agreed on that language. And that, again, was to protect Goffstown from an unfortunate New Hampshire Supreme Court ruling, which I believe was 3-2. What was it? I'm sorry. What was it? It was a close one, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
So where can one learn more about the area? Copies are provided on both the Goffstown and New Boston websites. You can contact the SAU office by calling 603-497-4818, or you can email me. My name is Scott Gross, and my email address is scott.gross@sau19.org. And some people in the community have asked, well, what are some of the next steps? So we're holding a public hearing right now where we can get public input. Copies of the current and the amended area agreement are sent to the New Hampshire Department of Education, as well as the New Hampshire State Board of Education for review and approval. So both entities have to kind of sign off on it. From there, both communities will place the area agreement renewal on their respective school warrants for March 2022. And these area agreements, they'll be discussed at the deliberative session, but they can't be amended. So a voter can't step up and say, hey, I want to change page 2, page 7. They're not subject to any type of an amendment at the deliberative session. And then finally, in March, it would appear on both town warrants, and it has to pass at both town warrants. And if it doesn't, then it would go back to the drawing board, where both communities would then have to renegotiate. Other people wanted to know, well, if this isn't set to go live until July 1, 2024. Why are both communities doing this now? For that very unlikely event in which one community or both were to reject, you need that time before it were to expire. So provided that both communities approve the area agreement renewal, it will take effect on July 1, 2024. And with that, the last slide, just, you know, both communities, you can see from these photos, they have a shared history and a promising future, you know, for our students. I've been able to work for both New Boston and Goffstown school boards, and I feel personally that there's a strong bond there. Both boards are certainly working in the interest of the students collectively, and I think we're a better, because of this area agreement. I'm just speaking myself as a citizen of Goffstown. It's a pleasure working with the two school boards in both communities. So with that, I could entertain any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Does anybody, board members have questions? Go ahead, Jared.
Just the last thing that you mentioned for passing, this is a 50+1
Right.
majority to pass. It's not a 60
That's
or
correct.
66%.
50+1.
Simple
you.
majority.
Simple majority.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Any other question? Go ahead, Ellen.
I have two for clarification.
Okay.
Doesn't matter which way I start. The termination clause, which I fully agree with, but I need to have a better understanding, because it says,
What page are you on?
oh, it's page 7, the first slide,
Oh, on the,
in the presentation.
the
Yeah, and keep in
presentation.
mind, Ellen, that not all of the entire language is on that, but, you know, there
Right.
is more than just that.
Okay. It says on that slide, furthermore, in the event of termination of this agreement for any reason other than withdrawal pursuant to this RSA. I can't, so if New Boston should decide to withdraw from the area agreement, build their own schools, whatever, okay? They are not required to continue paying any bond obligation. Is that correct?
They are required to, but if you recall, Dunbarton didn't withdraw.
Oh,
Okay? Dunbarton alleged they didn't.
Heather?
Yeah, hang on one second, Dan. Scott's answering that question.
Yeah, I know, but I think he's going down the wrong path from the question.
All right, go ahead, Dan.
oh,
Sorry. What a withdrawal is, Ellen, is they leave the area before we entertain a new bond, not after it starts.
is that what pursuant to RSA 195 so-and-so? Is that what
Yes.
195 refers to?
There's a,
Yes.
there's a statutorily required process of
Withdrawal,
withdrawal. So if a community wants to withdraw from an area agreement, there's a process that's outlined in the state law that says how you have to do that.
Prior to a bond?
Yes,
Okay. And if they do not withdraw at that time, then withdrawing subsequent to a new, right now, we don't have a bonds happening and bond payments are all done.
correct.
Okay, so should we enter into it again for grades 7 through 12 at some time in the future? Like I said, this is 10 years going forward with this agreement. Should the sending district, let's say in 5 years, we agree to do something at the high school, whatever, okay? And they do not elect to leave the area agreement prior to us bonding or going forward with that, then afterwards, subsequently, if the sending district chooses to leave, withdraw from the area agreement, they would then be required to continue paying.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the new language.
Right.
And that's what this is referring to when it says RSA 195.
Correct.
So-and-so. Okay. I needed absolute clarity on that. Thank you. My second question is, and it could be that my reading of it, I might be reading it wrong. So it's page 2 of the, what does it say on the final draft of the area agreement? Page 2 in that great big paragraph at the top.
Okay.
Okay, as I read it, and I'll read the sections that you guys can clarify for me. It sounds like there are two opportunities for half of 1% to be taken off of our rental. So, and tell me, which would mean a whole percent point could come off. Just tell me where I'm probably incorrect with this. First, it says, if at any time JHS or MVMS is placed on warning or probation, and NEASNC, and no plan for corrective action filed within the prescribed guidelines, a charge shall be reduced, the rental charge shall be reduced by 0.5%. Okay. This reduction in rental charge shall cease once the receiving school district has complied with the requirements for presenting a plan for corrective action. Okay. But then it says, if the corrective action plan is not implemented in the time prescribed, so, or absent a timeline set up for implementing it, the rental charge owed by the sending district shall be reduced by another 0.5%. So.
Well, you put in the, you stated another.
Right.
Oh, by,
You
reduced
put-
by 0.5%.
Right.
I'll take that other out,
Right.
you're correct. So, as I'm reading this, the first one gets charged if there's no corrective plan, and the second one gets charged if the corrective plan is not implemented. So, that would assume not implementing would mean that there is a corrective plan, so the first half of 1%
Would be restored.
would be restored and potentially, or just continue at the 0.5%. I just don't, I want us to be clear, tell me where I'm thinking wrong. I don't want anybody to think that this is cumulative and adding to a whole percent. Should, I mean, and I know somebody here is gonna say, and I agree, this happening is not gonna happen, but then someone like me would say, then why is it in here? But, be that as it may, it's in here. I just don't want anybody in the future, and we'll all be gone, to think that this is cumulative and it adds up to a whole percent, should we really mess it up somehow. And responding to the NEASNC reports, okay? It's never happened in the past, we've always complied with what was needed. It's just that this is going into an agreement, a contract, it's gonna last for 10 years, and unless this gets changed, it'll go on it forever.
Right.
So, and this is something a little different, I think, from the previous one. I
Dan?
just want clarity from everybody.
Okay.
That we are on the same baseline. It's not adding up to 1%.
No.
The second, the half of 1% would continue if we don't implement the corrective action. I just want
Right.
clarity on that.
Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, so the way I read that is, so if we don't present a plan, then it's reduced by 0.5%. That 0.5% is reinstated once we have a plan in place. But then the second part is saying that if we don't implement the plan within, a certain amount of time, 18 months,
Okay.
then it's another 0.5%. So it would never be a whole 1% because we would have to have the plan to implement the plan.
Okay,
Right.
I just want to make sure we're all,
Thank you,
I'm,
Shane.
yeah, that's absolutely.
Dan, did you have something? I heard you come off.
Nope, Sean
He did it.
said
Shane.
it
He did
perfectly,
it.
thank you.
Shane,
Shane.
Came close.
We've never met in person. It's fine.
He's sitting in your seat, Dan.
Yeah, someday.
all right, Ginny, go
So
ahead.
anyway, thank you for
All
your
right, wait,
time on
Ginny
that.
has something to say.
I think the bigger issue there is if we didn't plan and fix the problem with the NESNC, we'd lose our accreditation for our own high school, and we would be doing huge detriment to our own students who would not be able to get into the college that they're looking for, probably would have trouble getting into any vocational program they wanted to get into. So that's kind of a moot point anyway, because it's something that's never gonna happen because,
I was gonna say it too.
Right.
it's something that, that would be, on our part, stupid not to fix.
Right, true.
Totally agree.
Thank you, Jenny.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So I do want to open this to the public, if the public comment has any questions on the area agreement. I know we do have a few people here. Anybody had any questions on this before we move forward? Does anybody else, board members? Go ahead, Amanda.
I was listening the other night from New Boston too. I just want a little more clarification of why the tuition went from 2.5 to 2 in the first place.
It's my understanding that at the time, Dunbarton was threatening, to leave, and in order to try to convince them to stay, there was an agreement to go down to 2%. I was not here, but that's what I had
It
heard.
was a negotiation
It was a
tactic,
negotiation.
Yeah.
basically, in dealing with Dumbarton.
Dunbarton, right. Dan, did you want to?
It is, as Jeannie said, both Jeannie and I were there, and it was a negotiation tactic that New Boston did.
Right. So
And-
now we're restoring it back.
And then New
To the
Boston,
2.5.
left anyway.
Right, and they left anyway. Yep.
And it was something now that New Boston agrees. At the time, we both did it as a negotiation tactic to keep the people in the agreement at the time. But in fact, it's only right to put it back to where it belonged. So,
All right. Any other questions before I close public comment on the area agreement? All right, and now we need to accept the final area agreement draft.
Motion to accept the final area agreement draft as presented.
Thank you, Jarrett. Do I have second by Shane? Any further discussion before I do roll call? All right, seeing none. Ginny?
yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. So now I need a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Motion to adjourn the public hearing.
By Jared, do I have a second?
Second.
By Shane, I'll do roll call.
Yes.
Ginny? Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. So now we are going to call the Goffstown School Board meeting at 7:35. We already did the pledge. Before we get into our full meeting, we do have a presentation tonight by Mark Frazier. He was hired, I guess, by the Facilities Committee. We've invited the Facilities Committee to attend if they have questions. I do have Jeff O'Brien on the phone. So we'll let Mark talk, and then if you have questions, raise your hand, and we have a microphone over there for you guys. Hi, Mark, welcome.
Good evening. For the record, Mark Fougier, Fougier Planning and Development. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure working on this with you and the staff, which were very helpful, by the way. So I was contacted this past summer to take a look at what's been going on here in Goffstown relative to development and what type of impact that might be having on the school system here. We looked at school-age children data from development projects, enrollment trends, building permit data, how much development has been occurring, history of building permits, looked at enrollments over the last few years, and then we came up with some estimates on what type of impact the new development may have based on unit counts. So as far as enrollments, it's really a mixed bag for Goffstown over the last 5 years. The preschool kindergarten enrollment's up 16% since 2017. Your middle grades are pretty flat over the last same time period, and the high school's down 11.23%. Overall, it's been fairly flat with no significant swings seen here. New development. This was a very surprising discovery for me because, if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in our region and in Hampshire in general, actually all of New England, construction's through the roof everywhere. There's a lot of development going on in all the communities, and but that's not occurring here. in Goffstown, and actually it's been kind of anemic. You can see the building permit activity since 2011. Your biggest year was 2012 with 18 building permits, which isn't a lot. And then it's been fairly, steady, 8 to 10 every year, which isn't a significant amount. I met with the building department and the planning department to try to get an idea if there's some projects in queue that we should be looking at. Over the last 6 years, there's only been 18 new lots approved in Goffstown, which again is not a lot. There are 2 big rental projects that have been approved though. One on Bog Road called Woodland Village, and one downtown on Factory Street with 99 units. Woodland's under construction, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I haven't heard, the town hall has not heard of any activity occurring on Factory Street. It's been approved for a while. So I don't know what the status of that is, but I haven't heard anything on that. So again, the development's been mainly single-family homes, a few condominiums is what's been going on as far as development. Home sales obviously have been mostly single-family home since 2015, with sales peaking in 2017, and it's been a slight decrease since then. 204 homes sold in 2017. Last year there was 167. Condominiums have been in the 40 to 50 range. And again, looking at the new home sales there, the peak was in 2015 with 17, and it's been 5, 8, 9, 10 since then. Not a lot of stuff going on. So I wanted to try to gather some data that would be useful to you as far as planning purposes and moving forward. And I was able to find a development in the community called Monarch Ave with some relatively new homes. And looking at the number of school children living in those homes, we came up with a ratio of 1.64 children per home. That's an actually very high school-age children ratio, way above the norm, which is typically 0.64. These are mostly 3-bedroom homes. But that's what's happening, and for planning purposes, that's a ratio you may want to use. Obviously, it can be adjusted if something comes down the pipe, but as development happens in the community, you can use that number to give you some idea of what might happen. A project that just has broken ground is the Woodland Village Bog Road project. The first phase is 42 units out of a total of 74. There's going to be 5 1-bedroom and 37 2-bedrooms in this first phase, and no 3-bedroom units. This is a 100% affordable housing apartment complex, similar to the townhomes at Abington Square, which is a similar type townhome development that's been up for a few years now, that has 25 units. The big difference there is Abington Square has 10 3-bedrooms, and this project won't have any. So if we look at what's happening at that project, we're looking at about 0.44 children per unit, which again is a little bit skewed because of the 3 bedrooms, but for planning purposes, that gives you an idea of what to possibly expect out of Woodland Village. So when that project is full, at least at the beginning stage, we're looking at a range of between 14 and 19 school children potentially there, and a build out between 25 and 33. The other ratio I used is a smaller ratio of 0.33, which is more of a statewide number that I use when I don't have local data. So that's probably the biggest thing that's coming down the pike for the town in the near term. I did reach out to the developer who I know, and I would expect at least a year construction before they're going to be occupied and up and going. But then they'll be moving into phase 2, and there was no timeline for that second phase of development. Factory Street, as I said, I have no idea what's going on there or the timing. Given its location, I suspect it's going to be a lower number. I'm not aware of that any of the units are affordable, which will make a difference. Affordable units generally have more children per unit than market rate, but it's something to keep an eye on. If it is market rate, I would think it'd be 10 kids or less, given the site in an old mill and its location. But again, it's something to keep an eye on. So I think moving forward, I would suggest, starting a relationship with the building department and the planning department and try to get a summary of data every year. It is published in the town report, but having that data available to you to find out what type of developments are occurring in the community, how many units have been approved, and more importantly, what's starting construction. Sometimes stuff gets approved, like the Factory Street project, but they sit there for years and years. And other things may be fast-tracked. And those two departments usually have a pretty good understanding of what's happening, who's doing what, and where things may be stand from a construction standpoint. So there was no huge surprises. Again, I think the biggest surprise to me was the lack of activity. I've talked to a few realtors. There's really no explanation of what's going on. Cost could be a factor. There's impact fees in the community that may be making people nervous, but aside from that, it's pretty quiet here. So be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ellen, go ahead. I saw her first. Or did
Okay.
you have and then Jared. Go ahead, Ellen.
Okay. We have, and you've kind of, in a way, confirmed it due to the low number of new housing that's been built over the years. What is the enrollment impact due specifically to the existing home resales in the past several years?
Well, that's where I'd say 90% of the growth is coming from. Yeah, it's.
But is there, like, a house sells, how many kids more would we expect from that resale?
I didn't do that math. I mean, there's been, on average, between 160 and 200 homes sold every year, and your enrollment has not really changed that much since 2015. So it's not a lot. Not a lot.
Mark, one of the challenges that we continue to have is the growth at Glen Lake School
Right.
and at Maple Ave School.
Right.
Any insights there? Typically when we're looking at home sales, if it's a home that is more expensive, we would expect that to have middle school or high school age kids, maybe not kind of a starter home. But we continue to see the growth at Glen Lake and at Maple Ave.
What's the difference between Bartlett and Maple Ave?
Different parts of the town, the catchment area is different. So the Bartlett
Something's-
catchment area is over towards Pinardville.
Yeah.
And it's,
Maple Ave is?
no, Maple Ave is the entire rest of the
Oh,
town.
okay, so Bartlett's more near,
Manchester.
West
Village.
Manchester.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's more established community.
It's a community school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then I would, that's interesting. We'd really have to dig into the numbers and part of the problem is, and I've been working with your database expert, trying to trace back, all right, so-and-so, this new family moved into town, where their address is, when did that happen? And following it back, I did a similar exercise a few years ago for New Boston, which was much more complicated because they have a lot of development going on that was all approved before the crash and got mothballed, and then it's back on track. So there's a lot more new development to track, and it was more complicated. The only thing I can think of, without taking a harder look at it, is in the rest of the community, there's more homes. The catchment area is bigger, and there's been more home sales in the Maple Ave area than there has been the Bartlett.
So again, coming from the house resale.
Yeah,
So
but, I mean, the
It's
numbers
all
aren't.
resale.
Yeah, it's all
Right,
resale.
it's
It's all resale.
But we just don't have a multiplier, so
I
to
mean, you're
speak.
adding,
Right.
obviously, like in 2019, you had 10, if every one of those has 1.2 kids or 1.5 kids, you got 20 kids there, 15, 20 kids. So that's certainly adding to things. It's not zero, but it's not like 40, 50, 60 homes where you'd see that. You'd see it.
So Jarrett, you had your hand up, and then Ginny.
Thank you. So just a continuation of what Ellen was asking. So we don't have a school-age child ratio for existing home sales that you could try to give us for this town. Is there something in the county of Hillsborough that you might be able to quote, or a state average to say?
I can look back at, it's something that's typically not calculated, because I get hired to evaluate, there's a 30-lot subdivision coming in, how many kids are gonna come out of that? I've never been asked to look at, which has made this interesting. Well, what's happening with these existing homes, And I can circle back with the woman, her name escapes me.
Betsy.
Betsy, thank you. And see if we can try to look at that.
Yeah, that, I think.
And I'll look at what number I think I did come up with a number in New Boston.
Okay.
So,
Second question, if I may, Ms. Chair.
Go ahead, Jeff.
As part of your adventures in this project, were you able to look at anything to do with a predictive indicator of new births within CMMC that might be related to Goffstown or anything along those lines, to kind of give us a 5-year edge?
yeah,
of
no,
what might come down the pipeline?
I don't do that type of
Okay.
analysis.
That's fine. Just had to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
But, that's certainly something that, that's published every year too, so.
Ginny, you had your hand up.
I know in my neighborhood, we've had homes that people have sold recently, that people that have not had children in the school system for quite a while have sold, and new families have grown in that have children, that have added quite a few children that are all elementary school age. Is there any way to track that trend in homes that are sold that have been childless for a while, and now new families are growing in with small children that are moving into the community for their family to grow up in, as a tracker of kids coming into the community, other than, like new house sales and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same point. It's basically sifting through 150 to 200 sales per year, and which I have in a Excel spreadsheet from the assessor, so I know what's sold per year.
Yeah.
But then I need to get with Betsy to see, all right, in 2015, there was 160 new home sales. What are the addresses of the new children that came into the school system? And match that up with the sales each year to come up with that ratio.
With the resales.
Yeah, with the resale of what, so, you could say for every new sale is gonna be 0.6 kids, or whatever that might be. So it's trying to mash that numbers together without going down each line item, and do it as efficiently without spending a lot of money and time.
But that's the number, that ratio of the resale was where we were really focusing more on, because we've had so much resale in the past several recent
Right.
years. I mean, my husband and I downsized. We had no kids in the school.
Right.
2.5 moved in.
I mean, the numbers are up, but they're not, for Glen Lake, they're up, but they're up from 177 to 206. There was 220 number, and so it's up, but it's not up 60 to 80 kids. So it's not a big number. It's not a big number. I think you're basically treading water, you're placing what's leaving. People are graduating, they're coming in, and it's
And downsizing and little ones move
downsizing,
in.
but, right, or the kids graduate and they're empty nesters like my home, but, neighbor down the street sells and 2 kids show up, so they're basically, it's not growing, it's not causing a huge growth in the enrollment, it's just replacing what's being lost every year. So, if we can do it simply, without a lot of effort, we'll get you a number, otherwise, I'll talk to Scott and say. It's
Having a
not
multiplier
worth spending $5,000 on.
would be helpful, to have a multiplier.
One
Yeah,
thing-
go ahead, Brian.
One thing I would encourage the board to consider, our challenges around our enrollment and our ability to predict and have a good sense of how many kids are gonna be in the different schools, what the implications are for class size, is hard for us. I would absolutely encourage us to keep the relationship with Mr. Fougere, and it makes sense to have him come back, update this, take a look at it, or is he able to extrapolate any other predictions that he might have, I think it's worth keeping an eye on this and keep looking at the data and looking at how many kids are we getting out of the existing home sales, and really continue to monitor and track it, because for us, it's very helpful to have, you know, a town planner like Mark who's able to kind of go through, he knows the questions to ask. He can, like the example he gave where he used a neighborhood and did kind of an estimate based on that. It's just very helpful for us. So I would encourage us to keep the relationship with Mark and circle back to this in the future.
I mean, I think that, you know, obviously the Bog Road development needs to be closely watched. I mean, I'm using an existing project in town as a number. You know, this is not the same developer, but the same type of development. They're all over the place, and the numbers are all over the place. There's a project in Amherst, which has very few kids. In Merrimack, there was like 3. But in Londonderry, there were like 60. I almost fell off my chair. Townhome development, just like Abington, and there was like 60 kids in there. Way out of the norm. But, you know, knowing if it's gonna be 60 or 5 is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when your school's already
Yeah.
filled.
I mean, having Abington in your community gives you an inkling,
Right.
which I think is very helpful. So I don't think it's gonna be Londonderry, but at least, you know, it's mostly 2 bedrooms. But so that's the type of variety you can get from a similar 100% affordable project. We think that all be, you know, huge amount of kids, and it's not. It's all over the place.
Ellen, I saw your
Do
hand up.
we, I think it will be very important to us to have some kind of a multiplier or guide figure for the resale impact. I don't have any idea how you come up with that other than comparing actuals, but I think that's gonna continue here. Houses are still selling
Well,
overnight.
that's where the trend is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where the activity is, I should say. I mean, and you do have condominiums that are selling too.
Yeah.
In a smaller rate.
So,
And I have those addresses too. So I'll circle back with Betsy if it can be done fairly simply. We'll see if we can crank it out.
So you don't need anything from us to say, go do it. Okay.
No, I think he'll just get back to somebody, Scott, Jared,
working with
Betsy.
Scott.
Yeah, I'll work with Mark.
Okay, and Amanda had her hand up.
Just gonna say, I'll remind the board that I think it was about 2 years ago, 03, 04, 05 was top 10 zip codes in the US. That was legit. I was like, go, go, go. Let's go to Boston, let's go to Boston. So
Yeah.
those millennials and the young families just,
Yep.
they have to get there. So,
Right.
Sorry.
No, that's right. Thank you, Amanda.
No,
And
you're right.
it all makes sense, you know,
Yeah.
if you have a larger home, if you have a 3 or a 4-bedroom home and your kids are grown, it makes sense, you're gonna downsize, somebody else wants to
Right.
buy that home. That's the cycle that we're seeing over and over. And then in New Boston, it's further complicated because there are, last we checked, Mark, it was like almost 170 approved building lots that,
Yeah.
as Mark said, have sat. They
Right.
have not been built on, and now that building's starting to happen, but they're already approved. So
Right.
almost 200 lots that the planning board already approved.
Wow.
Why on earth did they approve so many? They used to have like a limit of 2 or 3. Like,
Well, they did.
oh my God.
So does anybody have any other questions for Mark before
Thank you.
we say goodnight?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
for
you,
your
Mark,
time,
for
Mark. We really
coming.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it, and
Have a
then
great
just get back with Scott
Yeah.
or and we can have an update
Sure.
soon as
And
to what to.
I wanted to also, you know, let the board know, I think I sent it to you before, but I'll send it to you again. I did a 20-year enrollment. I looked at our enrollments from 20 years ago, and what you see is we have lower enrollments that we did back in the 2001 to say 2009 era.
Did you take out Dunbarton from the
What?
stuff? Did you take
This
out
is only
Dunbarton?
Goffstown.
Okay.
And then keep in mind that we didn't even have Glen Lake until 2006. But we historically had we had 3,100 students in 2006. And I'm going to use that as the benchmark. 2006, 200 kids at Bartlett, that's what we have now. Glen Lake, we had 140, the brand-new school just started. Maple had 468, Mountain View 982, it's at 880 right now. And Goffstown High School, 1324, and it's at 1,006 right now. So I think what you're seeing is, again, Mark is the expert, but it's generational turnover of homes. And what's gonna happen is we're going through a little bubble right now at elementary, but so eventually it's gonna kind of go through. And I think we just have to kind of and when that happens, we'll be well poised for that, because we have capacity at Mountain View and the high school. It's, we don't have capacity is at the elementary schools, so.
Which school is the most sensitive from enrollment as far as capacity?
Glenn,
Glen?
Glenn.
No, not any, well, Glen Lake would be, but we just put an addition on it.
Okay.
Probably Maple Ave.
Probably Maple Avenue right now, and Bartlett to an extent.
I can't do any more on that one.
Yeah, if Bartlett gets much over 200, we have a big problem.
So you're
And that-
basically right there then.
We've been there.
I mean, you're
you
at
know,
199 this year, so
Right.
you're right there.
Right, and we were just over 200 for a couple years. It was back in the 190s. I mean, it's been teetering, I would say, plus or minus 15 kids
And
over
that's with
the last 10
portables.
years.
Interesting, Brian.
With portables.
In
Right.
2002, Bartlett's population was 241, 2003, 242. This is,
Now,
2004.
There's a difference, though.
258.
Is at that time, there was a preschool program there. So I
At
think,
Bartlett?
yeah,
Okay.
So we were including half-day kids in
I
that.
think we were including preschool kids in that count.
And then after that's been pretty much flat, you know,
It's
around
been
190,
super steady.
200, yeah.
And we haven't even fluctuated the classes much, you know, like add a second grade class, take away a third grade class. We haven't, it's been,
But, you know, conversely, Mark, when you look at Maple Avenue, right? 2016, 432. 2017, 468. 2018, 467. 2019, 490. 2020, so that one is trending up,
Yep.
up, and we're gonna be over 500 next year. Well over that, 520 probably. So that's another one that's, like, Maple is the most challenging, I think.
Yeah.
Glenn Lake.
Have a great night.
All right,
All right,
thank you,
thanks,
Mark.
keep polishing that crystal ball, Mark.
Yeah, right?
Figure out what to
It's
do
like
with
weather
full-day
forecasting,
kindergarten.
right?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, happy Thanksgiving. Good night. Thank you, Mark. All right, so moving on, correspondence.
None this evening.
All right. Accommodations, good news. Caleb?
Not this evening.
No?
Not a lot has happened with sports being over. There's kind of a lull between any of our musical or theater or otherwise performances.
Okay. It's nice and quiet.
Yep.
Amanda?
I have a message to read that was supposed to be from 2 weeks ago, so it's
Okay.
a little bit past, but I was not here. From Krista Scarlett, GHS Future Business Leaders of America Advisor. GHS FBLA attended the annual Fall Leadership Workshop on October 21st at Camp Carpenter in Manchester. This event is the first leadership workshop of the year for FBLA chapters throughout New Hampshire. Students spend the day networking, engaging in team building exercises, and there's always an inspirational, motivational speaker. Also, before attending this event, each chapter is asked to create a display to be included in a contest portraying the FBLA annual theme. This year's theme is Success Starts Here. Goffstown won second place for this competition. Goffstown also won first place in the contest to raise the most funds for the New Hampshire Food Bank. Students ran a penny slam during homecoming week and raised over $2,500. So far, GHS FBLA is off to an amazing start.
Yes, they are. Thank you.
She runs such a great program.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
Anyone else? Shane?
I just want to commend all who are involved in the planning of the vaccine clinic last week here at the high school. I was privileged to be jabbed in the arm by one of our lovely school nurses here from the high school. She was great, and it seemed like everything went smoothly, and a well-run event, so.
Thank you, Shane. Anyone else? Accommodations, good news? Jenny?
Yep, I was reading the Bartlett newsletter, and I read that they have a community celebration of their donations to the food bank, and they're doing a community walk on the 18th, which sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And on the 19th, they're having a movie night.
Oh, nice.
That they're showing a Disney movie to the kids, so, oh, I'm sorry.
Speak up.
My voice is not doing so well tonight. They're having a community movie for the kids, and it's a Disney movie on the
Nice.
19th, so
Thank
some
you,
fun
Vicky.
stuff happening at Bartlett.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? All right, I will open to public comment if there's anyone that has any public comment. All right, I close public comment, and next we need to approve November 1st meeting minutes. Did anybody move to approve? Okay, Ellen makes a motion to approve. Anybody see anything before I take a second? All right, I'll take a second.
Second.
By Ginny. Any discussion? Okay, I'll do roll call. Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes. Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Dretta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. So now we go on to our committee reports. Scott?
Sure, tonight you have a manifest in the amount of $1,860,896.21. As typical, the majority of that manifest is in payroll, taxes, and benefits of over $1.3 million. Your special ed activity, most notable there, aside from some out-of-district costs, are your Durham School Services for in-district special ed transport in September. Your general expenses, the largest one is your SAU 19 November assessment. File Wave is your device management software that helps Steve and the IT folks diagnose problems kind of, virtually. Arbiter Pay, we are depositing more money into the GHS and MVMS athletic officials account. Goffstown Truck Center, your late buses and kindergarten transportation. Home Depot Pro, custodial expenses there. Xerox, that's a quarterly, we went to a quarterly versus a monthly payment on the copier lease. Goffstown Water Precinct is your water charges for half the year. BMO Harris Bank, that's the purchasing card. The lion's share of that cost was repairs to the tractor here at Goffstown High School. And we also purchase HVAC parts with the card. Lastly, we did Pelmac Industries. There was a security system installed here, or a portion of that, a little over $5,200, and then we had to do some repairs at Mountain View Middle School for roofing. Last but not least was Performance Food Service, over $24,000 in food and commodities. Are there any questions from board members?
Any questions? All right, seeing none, I'll need a motion to approve the manifest.
Move to approve the manifest as presented.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
By Shane. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed.
All right, the next topic that I had, I just want to make sure, Retta, I don't think I sent it to you, I'm not sure if I did, it was the Performing Arts memo. Retta, you on? I know I sent it to Dan and Janelle.
Retta, did you hear Scott? Okay, do you have it?
Sorry, I was muted. No, I don't think I get that.
All right, hold tight. Let me just send that to you.
Just a minute. Is the next item the default budget change, is that?
What was that?
Yes.
We're doing the performing arts.
All right, so we're gonna start with the
First.
Performing Arts, and I, about a couple of weeks ago, actually it was more than that, probably almost 2 months ago, I think, Kim McCann, who's the assistant principal here, talked about performing arts and the difficulty in proceeding with their typical operating model, which was in which they had captured revenues from ticket sales, and with COVID-19 over the last couple of years, it's important to recognize that GHS performances are kind of funded by past and current performances for future ones, and it's it aligns with what your budget philosophy has been for FY '23, in the sense that we're trying to put some of those items into your budget, royalties, some supplies, et cetera, and then through the CBA, collective bargaining agreement, try to include those stipends for performing arts. There'll be a total, it would be a cost borne by the budget, not by ticket sales per se. So what Kim is requesting this time is pretty similar to what we did the last couple of years, where we would fund the Nutcracker, the spring musical, and then the spring dance gala with district funds. So essentially, we would be doing similar to what we did last year, but also fast forward to what the future is, what we're trying to accomplish in terms of our budget. And in doing so, the district would capture any revenues from ticket sales. So I did have a conversation with Kim and Josh, and we're pretty much ironed out what those ticket sales will be. It's not going to be free, but it's also not going to be $10 to $12. We're looking, I did not know this until speaking with Josh, but we charged for just regular concerts. I did not know that. We will not be charging for any type of concerts in the future. We will be charging a lot lower price for our students and senior citizens, and then there'll be a general admission price. I don't know what the future is going to be in terms of how many people are going to be going to performances in our auditorium due to COVID, but I feel pretty confident that we'll probably capture around $10,000 in revenue. So the price tag that Kim has put forward is a little over $21,000. I think we'll capture about 10,000 of that in revenue collection. So that being said, I recommend that we continue to do that. I know that Jared would typically ask me, okay, what line is this thing going to come from? If we did do that, I would recommend the student transportation line, because we know that we're not running as many buses, so I know that we've got ample funds there. If that's not a line you wanted to go to, I'd go to your health insurance line, because we're getting a return on our health insurance premiums through Health Trust. So those are two lines that have more than enough funding in it. So that's kind of where we stand. I think you've heard this one before, because it was the same thing that happened, last year.
Jared, go ahead.
So the question I have, Scott, I'm not sure, but the revenue from these performances, where does that money go? Does that go to a
General
general
fund.
fund?
General fund.
So that would be used for what?
To offset, it's offset taxes, yeah.
Would that go into like an unassigned fund balance, or?
What would happen is, we typically budget around $50,000 in local revenue for whether it be kids parking or, just various things. In future years, I would budget for an additional amount, so it might be 60, 65, 70. I have to see where eventually it would land, but suffice to say, Jared, that this would be unanticipated revenues, which can only be used for offset tax rate.
Go ahead.
Just because you said that this would be coming from student transportation, this would be, and you said this would be a district fund, this wouldn't be coming from an athletic transportation?
No.
From a school or anything along those lines?
This is just student transportation, not
Okay.
athletics.
You all set, Jared?
I'm good, thank you.
Ginny?
So what you're talking to us right now, Scott, is just the Nutcracker and the dance gala?
And
or
the
is
spring,
this-
and the musical.
And the spring
And the
musical.
musical?
There's 3 performances, yeah, that's what Kim is
And that's
requesting.
all right now?
The
It'll be for the rest of the
Nutcracker is
year.
gonna be starting really soon.
Right.
Right.
It's gonna be a scaled back version. In the past, it's been a really big to-do with community members. I think it's just gonna be students, right, Caleb? Yep. But the spring musical will be the typical
Okay.
spring musical. I don't think they're doing anything that's funky in terms of recording it like they did in years past. They do intend to have a live audience.
If it is recording, it'll be in-house.
Yeah.
We're working on that with the students we have on hand who can do video.
Well, that's cool. Are you set, Ginny?
And what was the third one?
And the third one is a dance
The
gala.
dance gala.
Right.
So does anybody have any other questions for Scott? He did write a motion at the bottom, if anybody is ready to do a motion, or if you have more questions.
And so is this gonna go into our budget for next year?
Yeah,
This
so
will
if
be
you
included
recall,
as a
like, we
budget
had,
cost.
we had put things like royalty, we put some things already in the budget. Jared and I defended it pretty vigorously at the last budget committee meeting, so, it's in the budget, and then the only thing that pends is the outcome of the collective bargaining agreement, and that's where we're working to include the stipends for those positions, so.
If I can pull a Scott, if I may for a moment.
Yes.
So I think this is just kind of bringing up this year into what our future planning is, because we
Right.
did plan for this for
Yeah.
subsequent years, so it's really bringing this into line
Starting
this
to
year.
talk about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'll make the motion.
All right, so the motion's typed out if you want to read that.
Yep. I motion to approve the GHS Performing Arts Fiscal Year 22 proposal that funds the Nutcracker Spring Musical and Dance Gala using fiscal year 22 budget dollars, and to approve a budget transfer from line,
You don't have to read all that.
okay, student transportation, in the amount of $21,050 to fully fund this proposal.
Thank you, Ellen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Shane. Any further discussion before I do roll call? Okay, Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yeah.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes?
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. Thank you, Scott.
So I
And then you have another one.
I did, and I don't know, so this kind of dovetails a little bit with Budget Committee, but at the last school board meeting, I mentioned to you that the default budget would need to be amended by this board, simply because I had to recalculate the SAU apportionment. So for those of you who don't know, the SAU services, there is a formula by RSA in terms of how each community pays for it. And it's pretty much set by ADM, average daily membership, is one component of it, 50%. And the other 50% is based upon assessed the evaluations of each community. Well, what happened was New Boston, typically you have to have these in place by August. Because they were under a new 5-year cycle, they requested an extension to file with the Department of Revenue. And because of that, I didn't have any numbers until after November 1st. As some of you who are New Boston residents, I'm looking at some of them, your evaluation, they went up 36%. So with that, Goffstown had already done a valuation, so their number didn't change as much, but for New Boston, who hadn't done it in 5 years, property values, as we know, went up. When I plugged in that new valuation for New Boston, it was considerably higher, and it changed the percentage or the proportion that New Boston pays. So I had to recalculate that, and when I recalculated it, Goffstown would owe $79,435 less than what I had anticipated under the old formula. So that being the case, Jared and I are going to be at the Budget Committee meeting tomorrow night. Is it tomorrow night? When is it? Thursday? Thursday night. Okay. And on Thursday night, we're going to be asking them to move the budget forward to public hearing. I can't really do that unless we have the true number. So that being the case, only this board can actually set the default budget. And what I've included in this little packet for you is the page, on page 2, it's just the new apportionment spreadsheet. And then I just redid the overview, so, reflecting that $79,000 and change decrease. And then the last page is just the changes that this board has made. And in red, I put what that, the effects of that last, if you were to adopt this and approve it, what it would be.
So you need each
So,
of these two motions?
I would need each of these two motions, which would allow Jared, who's representing the board on Thursday, to bring this number, the revised numbers, to the Budget Committee so they can move all of this to public hearing.
All right, so there's two motions typed out. Who would like to read the first one?
Okay, I will.
Go ahead, Ellen.
I move to lower the fiscal year 2022-2023 general fund default budget line, I'm not going to read it, SAU Management Services, from $1,937,692 to the new amount of $1,858,257.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ginny? All right, Ginny seconds. Any further discussion before I do roll call? All right, Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes?
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. So now we need the second one.
Okay. I move to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 general fund default budget totaling $45,303,211 and to forward an amended fiscal year 2022-23 general fund proposed budget of $45,609,859 to the Goffstown Budget Committee for consideration at their next scheduled meeting. Furthermore, to have the business administrator provide a revised fiscal year 2022-2023 total appropriation amount to the Budget Committee totaling $48,854,882.
Thank you, Ellen. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Shane. Any further discussion? All right. Oh, Jared, go ahead.
Just as a question, don't we have to set what the default total appropriation would be? And wouldn't that be listed here at $48,548,234, because that would be on the warrant?
The, the reason why I worded the motion, I'm going to provide the Budget Committee, Jared, essentially with
The difference, yeah.
these, but it still captures everything that you just said. I'll present them with this revised sheet, and they'll know that at the end, that this is the proposed budget they're bringing to public hearing, and this is the budget, the default budget. So I'll have both numbers.
Because the reason why I say that is the Budget Committee doesn't have discussions on what the default
Correct,
budget is.
they don't.
So they don't even vote on that.
Correct, but they do.
Use
but-
that as a comparison number for what the
Right.
proposed is.
The reason why it was important for bringing this forward tonight, as you know, is that they have to bring the proposed budget forward, and the default plus the new spending equals your proposed budget. So in essence, the proposed budget is 79,000 less.
And we'll sweep this up when we actually have our final
You got it.
warrant article discussion.
But it's important, I want to just add this to the record, in that when I explained to the Budget Committee before we even got started that, hey, by the way, we had retirements that we just found out about, they were like, okay. And I think it speaks to the school board and the Budget Committee's relationship that we now go back and say, yep, we got a lower number, we're bringing it forward. It's that trust factor and that transparency that matters. And, at the end, we didn't make a whole lot of changes in the budget, but, both entities acknowledge when it goes up and when it goes down.
Right.
You have to do that.
Thank you, Scott. Jared, are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, did you have something to say?
I did.
Go ahead.
The only thing that bothers me a little bit about the motion, it does not include the total default budget, as Jared was trying to infer. And if I were to look at this, I'm saying, we're asking for $48.8 million and the default's 45.3, if I read it quickly. And I don't want somebody looking at this motion and thinking there's a $3 million difference, because there's not. Do you happen to have the total default budget?
Yes.
And don't we have to
Could
approve
we
that?
include that as an amendment to
You-
this?
You can, and I'll, if you have a pen handy, I'll give you that number.
I do.
Good.
$48,548,234.
And for the people that have the printout, that's the orange on page number 3.
Right.
That number right
So
there.
that is the total default.
That's the total appropriation for our default budget. That includes food services.
And the grants budget, which is $2 million.
Oh, because this says, the motion said general fund default.
Yeah.
That's not all of it.
All right, so
So where does that
Dan wants
go?
it amended. Dan, how would you like the motion amended? Or Scott, do you know how to throw in that extra number?
Yes, I think I just add it to the end, with total appropriation amount to the budget totaling 48,854,882, and the that default total appropriation amount of 48,548,234.
Okay. All right. Did you get that, Denise? I did. All right, so Ellen, will you amend that?
Yes, so made.
And Shane, will you second that
Yes,
amendment?
yep.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions, discussion before I do roll call? Okay, Ginny? Yes. Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes, so motion passed. Thank you, Scott. Is that all you have for us right
Yep,
now?
that's it.
All right, so moving on to Budget Committee report, Jared?
Let me start with the easy stuff, since Scott already said it. Our next budget committee meeting is Thursday, so this Thursday at 7 PM right in this room. At our last meeting, we did not meet last week, we did meet the week before. We went through the middle school and high school budgets, went very well. There was a very healthy conversation around parity between non-curricular athletics, non-curricular athletics and non-athletics budget, because there's a big difference in the line items for what we spend on athletics versus extra,
Non-athletic,
Non-athletics.
co-curriculars. Yep.
There was a lot of questions of, well, is there still some pay to play that goes on? And of course there is, we know that, and, I did explain that this is our first step. And we're really looking at working on performing arts, because that was something that was found in our audit. So I've made sure to kind of continue to say, we're not done yet, we're just starting it, and we're starting with this because this is what was found in the audit the past couple of years. There was one motion made that was defeated, that was to strip the $9,200
Of royalties.
of royalties that we put into the budget, kind of what we just talked about. There was a motion that was presented, seconded, and it failed. Only those two people that made the motion voted in favor of it. Which was.
What was the reason behind that? if I may?
The reasons was their own.
Okay.
Is the way that they looked at it. There was, and I did say to all the members of the budget committee, this board sets policy, that board looks at budgets. If they don't like the policy we're doing, they could always run for a school board seat. So I did say that we're always welcome to, to have them jump ship and come over and join us if they want to. But it went very well, and as Scott reminds me, I lost out on a dinner because we thought we'd get through it without any motions, but there was one, so I lost on the meal. So I'd like to thank Scott for the offer on it, though. So our next meeting that we'll be talking about Thursday, we're going to be going over our CIP items, as well as hopefully the warrant article we'll talk about later today for our CRF. And then the only other article that we would bring to them that we are understanding is the GEA contracts once they become available. So there won't be a lot of discussion probably on Thursday. I don't think the town is ready to present their information. So if anybody wants to kind of go over our CIP again, or the CRM, or CRF, whatever we're calling it these days, that's what we'll be discussing on Thursday.
Great, thank you, Jared. Anybody questions for Jared? All right. Moving on, P&C. Brian, you guys were supposed to have a meeting tonight.
Yeah, so the next meeting will happen, what do we think, Retta, next month,
Oh, right, Retta's on the
right?
phone, I'm sorry. Retta?
I'm here.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
our next meeting is, again, I apologize to everyone that I wasn't able to be there. Our next meeting is on December 6th, Monday, December 6th, and we'll take up our mission vision statement then. Also, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we have the 2 awards that are open, and I was going to touch base during the meeting with you, Brian, about making sure that that's up on the website and into the newsletters. And if anyone has any other ideas about how to get this information out to the community, so there's the Dream Keeper, which is open to people or organizations in the community, and the Cornerstone Award is within for those working within the schools.
It's not just staff, though.
All right, thank you.
It's
And
not
PNC is
fair.
6 o'clock, December 6th, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you,
And
Retta.
that- and
Is
if
that
I
it?
could-
Oh, yeah, go
if I
ahead.
could just add, at that meeting, we will be bringing forward the 2 nominations for the awards.
Okay, perfect. Are you all set?
All set, thank you.
All right, thanks, Retta. Stipend committee, Ginny, is there any updates?
We have pretty much wrapped that up. We've
Okay.
sent in our information to the negotiation committees, and they are doing their business on that. And so for right now, it's wrapped up
Okay.
until after that, and then I assume we will start after contracts have been okayed.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, policy review, we met last week. Later on in the agenda, we have a few first reads. Our next meeting is December 13th at 5:30 at the SAU building. Ginny, C&E?
We did have a meeting, and Joyce Lewis presented the program of studies for the high school. And I believe you all got the changes. They're very minimal.
Yeah, that's later on in the agenda for new business.
Oh, okay. Then we will do that later. There were some things that we spoke about in our meeting, and that is the MST, the purpose of the partnership is to move students further into the vocational careers. And a lot of the vocational careers are, come under that purview. Electricity is one of them, carpentry, a lot of those things. And I think our vocational things that we have here are things that are not done at MST. So I think we do the things, we add on to things that are not provided at MST. We kind of add on to that. Food services have moved into work from the culinary classes because safe food handling are part of the curriculum. So that's done. In the business classes, students can move into entry-level positions after completing courses in the business strand. So a lot of those vocational steps are being taken care
Speak up,
of for
please, Ginny.
students.
Please speak up.
I'm sorry. And Joyce Lewis, who is our program of study person, has begun preliminary conversations with the administration and the counselors about development of a series of career pathways. These career pathways would designate a specific course of studies for students to follow that would result in readiness for college and/or careers. This work is currently under development and will be shared with CNE and the board when it's ready. Also, we have ROTC that we are working on getting that into the program if at all possible. And I guess that's it, other than the program of study, which we'll talk about.
Right, because you need motions.
Yes.
And then your next meeting?
Our next meeting will be in December 13th at 7 p.m. at the SAU.
Perfect. Thank you, Ginny. All right, Facilities Planning Committee. Jared?
So we just heard the presentation today. With all the activities that are going on for the rest of the year, specifically around budget, we're probably not going to have our next Facilities Planning Committee meeting until January at this point. I think it's the best course of action. So once we have that date, we'll make sure to communicate it to Ms. Warren so that we can put it out. And I'm sure we'll talk about it several times before then.
Thank you, Jared. All right, SAU Policy Review Committee is meeting on December 8th at the SAU at 5 o'clock, so that's the SAU policy. Following that meeting is the SAU budget hearing and board meeting, so that's the full board on December 8th at 6 p.m. Both are at the SAU. Superintendent report. That's
Thank you. So just a few updates for the board. We have completed all of our Homeland Security building assessments. So we had a gentleman from the state came in and reviewed all of our facilities, and we went through that process. That's something that we've done a number of times over the last probably 8 or 9 years. COVID vaccine has been approved for ages 5 to 11, so that's something that we've been anxiously awaiting. I know that there are a lot of people that have been looking forward to that. Shane did mention, but we had our staff booster clinic. This was for all of our staff that were interested in getting the Moderna booster shot. And we, in total, had about 250 participate. And again, our school nurses did the lion's share of the work, and we continue to receive support from Goffstown Fire as well as New Boston Fire. So I wanted to let the board know that I had mentioned previously that I was trying to come up with a way to allow a drive-up clinic for testing for COVID, and that is something that I think we're actually going to be able to do. I've been in conversations with Chief Allard, and I think we're going to be able to hire a detail and have one of the paramedics be available to do that. So we're getting closer. This is something that I was very frustrated that originally it looked like we weren't going to be able to do this, but I think we are. So stay tuned. I'll have more details soon. A question had come up recently about the Hooksett MOU and whether it had expired or not. And our SAU crack archivist has discovered that in fact we still have, was it 1.5 years on the agreement? So the Hooksett MOU is not, has not expired, and it is now solidly on Mr. Gross's radar to make sure that it doesn't expire. I wanted to let the board know that we have been evaluating Macs versus PCs for teacher laptops. That's something that we've had conversations over a number of years, and we created a form to allow teachers to give input as one of our next steps. And Mr. Bourget and Mr. Gross have been reviewing those, so we're not anywhere ready to make a decision, but minimally I wanted to have a thorough understanding of what the impact would be for teachers if we were to make a change. Certainly there's a financial reason. Macs are quite a bit more expensive than PC laptops. One of the questions I got asked a couple weeks ago was to cost out using the formula for the teacher board representative, and we have done that, and that amount is $892.08 based on the formula. So that was something that I had been asked to do for planning purposes. Scott?
I don't know why I was doing it, but I was reviewing policies last week, well, during a day off, but I did. And there is a policy that speaks to this. It's teacher rep, it says shall not be compensated. So you'd have to change your policy, just so you know that.
What, do you know the policy number?
I'll get you the policy number.
Okay.
It starts with a G, but I didn't want to go down the path of then you doing it, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
if you could
just
send
came
that to
across
me.
that, and I was like,
Okay.
ooh, we've been talking about that.
Yeah.
So we could approve this, saying waiving the policy, if we want to do it now.
Yeah,
We could do that.
yeah, you could do that.
Technically, yeah.
Okay.
Is that something that you can bring into negotiations, or are you too far into that to add
So
this?
we, at this point, we had, I'm not sure. I would need to give that some thought.
Okay.
But this is an amount that, I mean, in the grand totality of things, you know, less than $900, I think we could probably make some choices and find that money if the board wanted to do this.
That would be per person.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
And by
look at
policy,
2100.
we have 3 positions. So there, in our policy, there's an elementary position, a middle school position, and a high school position. And then just to continue the COVID discussion, the numbers are very high. I'm sure you're all seeing this in the state. We had over 1,000 new cases in one day in the state. That was the highest it had been since January. Hospitalizations are at an all-time high of 255. So in total, COVID numbers unfortunately are very much going in the wrong direction. The state is at 709 per 100,000 over the last 14 days. Hillsborough County is slightly lower at 602. test positivity rating is over 8%, which it hasn't been in a long time. So again, we're really trending in the wrong direction. 110 current school clusters, 18 current outbreaks. I don't know if one of those is considered Mountain View or not. Their numbers are consistently inconsistent. Goffstown, we're at 85 cases, and it was only about 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, we were in the 30s. So we have continued to really trend upwardly. And school cases for us, we have had 183 since school started, and we just keep plugging along. So consistently, we continue to hear, as I've shared with the board previously, the patterns that we're seeing, positive parents and kids in the household are positive. That tends to be over and over what we're seeing. Very infrequently are we having people say, I have no idea where my kid might have gotten it. That is definitely a small percentage, and we have had some infections of people who are fully vaccinated. So that number continues to be low. But if you look at the graphs from the state, we did look like we were trending down, and then it went right back up to another peak. So right now, we're still on the way up. There's no kind of top apex at this point that we've been able to see. But again, all of our staff continue to do a great job. I'd like to continue to thank our school nurses who are doing just an incredible job. Shane mentioned that they were all here last week doing our vaccine clinic. That's very typical of the level of dedication of our school nurses. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but we're very much looking forward to hopefully a little bit of subsiding of the numbers, because we're just not seeing it right now.
Heather,
Yeah, go ahead, Janelle.
I just had a question for Brian. I know typically we don't report out on this, but I've been thinking about it. Have we been seeing serious cases where children or staff are being hospitalized from COVID, or is it mostly you stay home for a couple days and you're back to school after quarantine?
So you're right, that isn't something that we have historically reported on, but I would say that we have had students and staff that have been pretty sick, including, I don't know if I could report on hospitalizations, but we have had people that have been pretty ill. So generally, we tend to think that cases in children tend to be very mild, including asymptomatic, when kids don't even necessarily have any symptoms that they identify. But we have had circumstances with students and staff where people have reported that they have needed pretty significant medical intervention and have been sick.
And been vaccinated? The adults?
No.
Not vaccinated adults
No.
getting it, okay.
No.
Janelle, are you all set?
Yep, thank you.
I know we started testing. Has that
We did.
added to some of these numbers with asymptomatic?
So we
positive?
we found a number of asymptomatic students through our testing program. Last week was our first go-around. It was really pretty smooth.
Awesome.
You know, logistically, there's a lot to work out, and when we get good routines established and kind of the cadence of kids coming down, staff coming down, but overall, it was a very positive experience last week. We did have some students test positive that we found through the testing program, which is the point of it, right? So the part of the point of this is to do the asymptomatic testing. It's to provide the close contact testing so that if someone was exposed to someone who tested positive, we would have the ability to test them. And then that last piece is the symptomatic testing, which we already have in place. If students who are enrolled in the program develop symptoms during the school day, they're able to go down to the nurse's office and be tested. But in addition, I don't want people sending sick kids to school. This has been my fear all along, which is why we've been working so hard to develop that off-site testing, which, and Scott's been involved, facilities has been involved. We've worked very closely with Chief Allard, and I think we're ready to roll with that. So that'll be another option for parents. I continue to hear from parents, they can't find a place to get a test. They're waiting a long time to get a test. They're waiting a long time for the results. And I know I don't mind disclosing that I'm participating in the testing program. I got my test result within 24 hours. It's really pretty quick. And depending on how you signed up to get the notification, it's either an email or a text message, and you find out your results, which is the same thing that parents would be getting. So, you know, we've continued to try to put as many layers in place, including the testing program at this point, but you know, the numbers are disheartening. You know, Thanksgiving's right around the corner. I don't think anyone has any optimism that things get better until some point in time after Thanksgiving is what we're probably looking at. You have seen, I don't know if you've seen in the newspaper, but there have been a number of schools that have had to go remote or have chosen to go remote. So
In
we.
New Hampshire?
Yep, yep. And the way that it works at this point is I can only close schools for 48 hours, and beyond that, I need the permission of the commissioner and the governor. We have not done that, so for us, that has not been a permission that we have needed to seek, nor do I intend to.
So I know you had your hand up, but to add to my question, so what is the rule if a student or staff tests positive that are asymptomatic? What's the quarantine if they're vaccinated or not vaccinated? Like, if they're vaccinated and they have no symptoms, do they have to quarantine, or
If they're positive, they have to quarantine.
regardless
Other
of
me- yes.
vaccination status? Okay.
Yes, so whether you're vaccinated or not, if you test positive, you have to quarantine. Household contacts, any household contacts who are not vaccinated are required to quarantine, and anyone who is vaccinated is not required to quarantine.
Okay.
So
I was just wondering what the asymptomatic, what
Yeah.
that protocol was.
For
Thank you.
anyone that has had COVID in the last.
in the last 90 days,
90
correct.
days, right. Thank you, Janelle.
Thank you, Janelle.
Go ahead, Ellen, you had your hand up.
The off-site testing, where is it, when, and who can avail themselves of it?
So I don't know that we have all the details ready to announce. We are looking at a town-owned property. We are looking at 2 days a week, Monday and Thursday, from 1 to 3, has been what we have been looking at. One of the days, it might need to be slightly later, but we're looking to set that up 2 days a week. And we thought that Mondays and Thursdays would make the most sense. There tends to be a lot of kind of built-up demand at the beginning of the week, and then over the course of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we would, have interest in getting the testing. But we're not quite finished, but we're right at the very final stages of this. There will need to be a referral process so that school nurses are kind of approving the student to be able to be vaccinated, to be tested. And we would be using our rapid antigen tests to do this. This is not a PCR test. The PCR tests are available through the SAS testing program with UNH. And these are rapid tests, so people would know within 15 minutes.
So this is just for students?
Students or staff.
Students or staff, not their families?
Not their
Students or
families,
staff.
correct.
Okay.
And, we've heard that it's been a challenge for people to buy tests, to find
yeah.
tests, to be able to keep them in stock.
You try and get an appointment.
So we
Can't do it.
we have them.
Awesome.
I went up and picked up 800 and something tests from DHHS.
Thank you.
So,
Any other questions for Brian before we move on? All right, thank you, Brian.
thank you.
All right, brings us to old business. We have draft warrant articles, so in your packet, Denise has everything typed out for us. So 2 and 3, 2 is,
Once we have confirmation from the Budget Committee, hopefully on Thursday, we should be able to fill out the first part of Article 2.
yep, and then 3
The
is.
second line in Article 2, we just
is-
approved,
right.
$48,548,234.
Yep,
So we're halfway through that one.
halfway, and then 3 we're still working on with teacher negotiations. So now, we have Article 4, which is the area agreement. And I think you all have a highlighted that what language from Attorney Eggert and DOE has approved. Dan, do you have something you want to say?
I do. I like the one the Attorney Egger did. I think it's more explanatory and easier to read than the one that's,
From the DOE?
in the RSA, because the one in the RSA is actually for the very first year, and we're gonna be starting the 51st year. We've already had almost 50 years behind us, so I like Eggert's better.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Do you need a motion for?
If we're good with 4 with Attorney Eggert's language, or if anybody likes with the
I'll move
DOE.
Article 4, Attorney Eggert's language.
All right.
Second.
We're
Motion,
moving that to the deliberative session.
yeah, Ellen, what is, your motion is to move it to
To
deliberative?
deliberative session.
Okay.
Or public hearing and then deliberative session.
We already did the public hearing today, so we're moving this
Okay.
Article
Got
4
it.
to
To
deliberative.
deliberative session.
So that's your motion? And Ginny, you second?
Yes.
Any other further discussion? And we're doing Attorney Eggert's language. You
Right.
have that in the motion too?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have that, Denise?
You're putting that in the
motion?
The motion is to accept the language for Article 4 that we received from Attorney Eggert
To be moved to the
to be
deliberative.
moved to deliberative session.
Yeah.
So it's,
Dan, you good?
I am good. We will need to make another motion after this, whenever we are doing the recommend or not recommend at some point. This
Okay.
is not fact. That's what I understand.
This is to move it to the deliberative.
right,
This is to accept the language and move it to deliberative.
Right.
It's not
Correct.
to put the recommendation or not recommend on the
That's right.
ballot yet.
You're
Correct.
right.
Yes. All right, so Ginny, second.
Yes.
Any other discussion?
Just, when would we actually do the vote to recommend? Would that be after deliberative for this?
No, it'll be
No,
We want to do
Before.
it before,
Yep.
Yeah.
during deliberative, so.
Wouldn't we do that tonight?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, you can, usually you do it right now.
Yeah. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. I'll do roll call.
Yes.
Ginny, Jared,
Yes.
Janelle?
I'm sorry, I'm confused on what we're voting on. We're voting on approving the language from Attorney Eggert and moving the warrant to deliberative, but we are not moving to do the vote yet. So we don't need to vote on it before we move it to deliberative?
To me, it sounds like it's all in,
It's
it's all the same.
Not necessarily.
It's two different votes.
Okay,
This is just to accept this language since we were given 2
Right,
choices.
and to
Right.
move this language
To the
on to the
deliberative.
deliberative section.
Then we
session.
make a motion
And then
to,
your next one would be to
To
recommend
recommend.
or not to
Right.
recommend.
okay.
Gotcha.
All right,
Okay, So
so-
then I vote yes.
All right,
That's
thank you,
it.
Janelle. Dan,
Yes.
Retta,
Yes.
Ellen?
yes,
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. So motion passed for this language to put on, go to deliberative. So now I need a motion to recommend Article 4.
so
Motion
moved.
to recommend Article 4.
All right, so Ginny made a motion to recommend Article 4. And do I have a second?
Go ahead.
Ellen, second. Dan, did you have something you wanted to say?
I don't know if anybody seconded yet.
Yes.
I got a second. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Roll call, Ginny.
Yes.
Jared.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Janelle.
Yes.
Retta.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes,
Shane.
Yes.
And Heather, yes. So motion passed. All right, so now Article 5. This is the CRF fund. If we're having it and if we're using 200,000 or if we're doing a different number.
So if I may, Ms. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Jared.
How much, Scott, how much do we actually have set aside in our capital reserve fund that has not been allocated for projects?
Have to give me a second.
And the reason why I'm asking this question, I think for the bigger board is, we've done 200,000 traditionally, or at least for the past couple of years. Is that enough based on some of the work that we want to do? I know that we have a lot of the ESSER grants coming up. You know, just trying to understand, do we want to stick with this number, or potentially do we want to expand it or contract it?
Especially this year when the bond is gone.
Right.
Jared, your current, I'm going to give you 4 different numbers. Your current balance now is around 440,000. However, you have allocated 155,000 for the Mountain View Cistern project, which has not been paid out of that fund yet. You've also allocated $30,000 for the replacement of the scoreboard. That hasn't been spent yet. So you have about $255,000 in that fund, roughly.
With how much anticipated?
Well, you have close to $10 million of CIP-related projects.
For 6 years.
Not all of them will qualify, not all of them do, but you've got millions
Okay.
of projects. Knowing that, we're gonna use some grant money for windows and for some other things, but you've got
It's a
a
lot of
lot
money.
more, you got a lot of projects down the road, especially in your air conditioning, air handler,
HVAC.
resurfacing Mountain View Road, parking lot. You got quite a bit.
So
I
is
will
there-
say though, Jared, I think there are some on the budget committee that will oppose this no matter what. But it would make sense to think about a higher amount,
Like,
at least 3, probably, 3 or 400,000 would make sense.
I was thinking
Looking at what we have in CIP, and I'm going from memory, a lot of the first couple of years was ESSER grants, but there were some that were listed for raised by taxation or impact fees. Thinking of it from a facilities planning committee, I think we should start targeting the widening of Mountain View Middle School to try to get that traffic flow better, especially, it gives us more flexibility on potential variations that we can put within that school for grade levels, if we wanted to go down that road. So I would look at that as a priority that we want to look at from a board perspective and get that done through impact fees and through the CR. I don't know if we can use CRF for that, actually.
Right.
We can.
Well,
Well,
We had ESSER
we have
grants
talked
we
about
could use,
ESSER
too.
funds, and we also talked about seeing what the bus turnaround project, which has far less cost. When you reroute the buses in one direction, you put the cars in another direction, that might be like a $150,000 project. And if you go widening the road, that could be like almost $1 million. So you might want to try the bus turnaround using, say, ESSER grant, see what that does, because it might have a good impact. It's hard to say, but just when you put all those vehicles in one line, it's not good.
Yeah.
go ahead, Ellen.
Just looking real quick, the school projects, after the projected revenues of whatever sources. We have a balance in 2022 of 352,000, then it goes up to 700,000, then 880,000, then 2025, it's over $1 million, and it stays at about $1 million. So there's a lot coming up that we don't account for with the various grants and impact fees and things. So it kind of would make sense to up it if we can. I don't know if we can maintain that higher value over time, but given that we're ending, about a $500,000 a year expense with the bond, putting another 200 into it kind of would make sense for the long-term planning of how we're gonna pay for these things.
Right.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's true, Ellen. Anyone else? So it sounds like we're thinking 400.
I wouldn't, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I wouldn't go that high.
I wouldn't either.
I think there might be a shock to the system of doubling it.
So
I agree with-
300?
Yeah, I'd go with 300. I agree with Scott. There's gonna be people on the budget committee, regardless of verbiage that's used, that are gonna vote no for this.
Absolutely.
But I think it will get through, with a $300,000 limit. I don't know about 400,000.
That might be pushing,
I mean, how do you feel as taxpayers looking at something to say, okay, they doubled it?
right?
You know, and even though I know Retta's gonna do a great job of putting out the communications out there of how we're gonna do this, a lot of people don't read that, unfortunately.
Right.
So I would go with 300, for this cycle.
Okay. Anyone else have a thought? Jenny?
Yeah. I would be concerned about increasing this much, especially if we're gonna talk about monies in Article 7. I almost hope that we're not talking about that, because we have a lot on this ballot, and we have a teacher's contract. So I would be careful. We still have budget people who are not thrilled about this fund anyway, being at negative, you know, not really pleased about it being there at all. So to keep adding to it and then having a teacher's contract and possibly in Article 7, and
So you're
an
saying
area
keep it
and-
at 200?
Yeah, I think we'd be better off not to push. I know maybe next year, go for it all, but I'm a little
We'll
worried
have
this year.
another contract next year, because we have support staff.
But-
So how
but that
about,
one- That one is for a lot less money than this one is.
maybe,
But
Am
we
I
also don't
right?
have the savings on the bond.
right? So maybe before we make a decision on 5, why don't we talk about 7, Article 7?
Just make a friendly amendment to change that to Article 6.
Yes, thank you. I was like, 7. Yes, so Article 6
Nice catch.
is increasing our 2.5% contingency to 5%, right? Because
Yeah.
that is
So-
allowed by,
Yeah, so the legislature changed the statute to allow for school districts to retain up to 5% of unassigned fund balance. This one, to me, this year, and I've had long conversations with Brian about this, it's almost mission critical. And the reason why it's mission critical is that this gives the school district the opportunity to address your school tax rate, so that when you do have revenue shortfalls, you're able to use these monies that have accumulated in this fund to lessen a revenue shortfall. I'm telling you, in 2 years, 3, definitely, you're gonna have a challenging revenue shortfall. This is going to allow me and you to stabilize that, so that we don't have the crazy roller coaster where we're up and down like an EKG. I mean, we gotta try to keep it, steady, so that if we were to potentially lose 600,000 or $1 million in revenue, we could use some of that, because the people forget that this is to be used for tax reduction and/or school expenditures that are kind of unanticipated. And in the case, I think this is a phenomenal tool for the school district to have in terms of balancing this out. And I'm just nervous that in 2 to 3 years, we're gonna see that revenue slip away. So this year, why this year, and why is this year mission critical? Because we're not gonna have, last year we had a 3.3 million unassigned fund balance to reduce taxes due to COVID and all these grants. I don't think it's gonna be quite as high, but it's still gonna be high this year. And then after that, it's not gonna be as high. And we're gonna know a whole lot more in May and June where our fund balance is gonna be. By having this 5%, you can in August or September say, you know what? Although we did sock away 900,000, we're gonna use 400 of that to stabilize the tax rate because our revenues didn't come in where we thought it would be. potentially. Or that could be a year from now, we say, you know what, we need to use $500,000 of this to stabilize that tax rate so we don't have a shock to the system. So, so to me, this is what, when I was a board member in your seat, I was begging for this. Why does the town have this and we don't? Well, the town has a lot bigger unassigned fund balance that they can use. But this gives you so much of a tool to make sure that no matter what the circumstances, you can deal with a revenue shortfall, or if you have some greater expenses, you can offset that by using fund balance. It's just a really, really good tool. I hope I'm explaining it well enough. If not, then ask me questions.
Ellen, you have a
Just one
question?
I think I asked it before, I don't remember. This fund does or does not accumulate year to year?
It doesn't, it lapses.
Does not.
So
It
you have to
lapses.
you have to vote before June 30th, you have to vote to how much you're going to retain in it.
So you
Okay?
can retain.
What I'm saying is that you have the ability to retain right now up to 2.5% of unassigned fund balance, which is right around $670,000.
Okay.
Okay? If this were to pass, you'd be able to retain up to $1.3 million. Doesn't mean you're going to, but you have the ability to retain those funds.
Okay,
So let's just say that hypothetically,
retain.
you decide that you're going to retain $1 million. That means that you have to put you've already got your 670, you gotta put another 330 to get to your $1 million, all right? Now we go through our audit, everything starts to shake out, we know in September, oh wow, we didn't have quite the unassigned fund balance that we thought we were gonna have, and if we don't do something, we had projected a tax rate increase of 60 cents, but if we don't do anything, it's gonna be 80 cents. Well, how do we get it to where we said it was gonna be 60? You have to kick in another 300,000. You take a vote, and you do
This gives
it.
us those funds
And
to
it
do
gives you the
that.
ability to do it.
So it's allowing the school district, these funds allow the school district to help level the tax rate year to year.
Correct. Now, my question is that we did not have this. Now, had we had this, we saw a 10-cent decrease in the tax rate. That's all great. But then when you don't have that one great revenue year, or you don't have that one big underspend year, now all of a sudden, everything flips, and now you could be looking at like a $1.10 increase or $2. So that gives you the ability to stagger that increase, not hit everybody all at one shot. That's why I think, from my seat, this is like so important, but.
I remember those conversations.
All right, so we need to make a decision on Article 6 and 5.
Okay.
So 6, it sounds like we should go up to the 5%.
Doesn't mean that you're gonna fully fund it at 5, it just you have the ability to go
The
up to that.
ability. Okay. Anybody have questions, comments? Shane, you look like you're thinking of something.
Just thinking. I don't have any questions yet.
Okay. Dan, anything?
No, I'm good. I like the idea of being able to do this.
Are you looking for us to vote this evening to recommend or not recommend?
I think we already did 4. I think, Jenny, do you have something that you want to say?
Yeah. I just think, like, yes, in a perfect world, this sounds great. I think it honestly is going to take too much teaching. I remember back in the day when the town couldn't understand the difference between the town having a checkbook and the school having a checkbook. The town could have a checkbook and that was fine, but the school having a checkbook, are you kidding me? You know? So I think a lot of teaching has to go before we like really stick our neck out and start adding more money to this and saying, well, because I think people don't understand what that, the whole tax thing is. And I think we're asking them to understand an awful lot of stuff that they don't understand and sometimes don't even choose to understand. I'm just worried. I think we have
Yeah.
to do more teaching. You and I understand it, and so it makes sense.
I'm willing to do whatever teaching is necessary on this one, and I say that because I think this is the year where you might be able to put more money aside for the potentially bad years that could be 2 to 3 years out. And if I wait, or we wait one more year, Ginny, my concern is that I'm not gonna have that COVID-related monies to put in this contingency type fund to stabilize anything. That's my big concern. I think in hindsight, I wish I would have pushed this further, even last year. There's always gonna be something, and that's my one regret. I should have, most districts did this last year when the legislation came about. We didn't. I didn't push it, but,
So what do you say to the people that say, instead of putting more money into this, why don't you just give it back to us now?
because what I would say is that for those people.
I mean, I understand.
Yeah,
But
I think what we're trying to do
there's-
for most people who have mortgages, that escrow their mortgages, you want, consistency in terms of your tax rate. When it goes like way down, and then, because when it goes way down, it rebounds and it doubles in that rebound effect. So if it goes down $1 one year because of an influx, and you had predicted a 75-cent increase, well, guess what? It's gonna go up $1.75 the next, and then that's a terrific shock to people. So, and I think what I would try to explain to folks is that, so the select board and the school board should try to manage the tax rate so that you don't have those wide, variations. And we're in a really tough position. I was talking to Brian today, like, we just got our FY23 state adequacy numbers today. I mean, we're preparing our budgets for, how do you do, how does one operate like that? So luckily, we're not gonna see any type of big time decrease in our state aid revenue for FY23. But if we had.
In Goffstown.
In Goffstown, New Boston will. But had we had this fund, it would help ease that pain a little bit. And you could slowly or gradually deal with it. So you don't, that's my take. And I do think that, I should share with you that I talked to our attorney, and I said, what happens if this fails? And she said, if it fails, you still have your 2.5% contingency fund. So there is no harm in proceeding here. If the voters approve it, it goes to 5%. The voters reject it, you still have what you have. So we don't lose.
I'm gonna move that we recommend Article 6.
All right. Oh, Retta's texting. Did she get disconnected? Oh, yes, Retta, go ahead. Hang on. Hold that motion, Ellen. Retta, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just tag on to what Scott's saying. We always have to educate the public, and I think it's something that we're getting a little bit better at, and I think we should think a lot about this, because it's a complicated concept, whether it's this year or next year or the following year, and we've got to get better with our communications around that. So, yes, Jared, I think that these are areas that we do need to communicate in, but it can't just be putting a text communication out there. So, I think that, we need to continue with that, building on what we've already put out there to help them understand.
Right. Thank you, Retta. All right, so I know Ellen was getting ready to motion. Is there anybody that would like any discussion more? Jared?
Yeah, I've just looked up RSA 198 4B, and this is listed as a contingency fund, a school district annually by an article separation from the budget and all other articles in the warrant, or the governing body of a city upon recommendation of the school board, when the operation of the school is by a department of the city, may establish a contingency fund to meet the cost of unanticipated expenses that may arise during the year. We're not using this as a contingency fund, as it's been explained to us. We're using it as a accounting gimmick to try to level set taxes.
I take objection to that,
Well,
because if
that's
you
what it
read.
says. It
Well,
says
where'd you get that
contingency
from?
fund 198.
Wikipedia, or where's that from?
from the New Hampshire RSA State Code.
Okay.
That I just read,
But
word for word.
you can use it for two purposes. You can use it for unintended expenditures and for the reduction of taxes.
Right.
It's specific. It is.
That's a side effect, but it's not saying anywhere in here that the extent or the intent of 198.4B,
But
the
it-
contingency fund, is to level set
It-
tax
it
rates.
always has been.
It's not listed in the text. That is not the
All right,
intent of the
well-
text. It's a side product, I agree with that, but that's not the intent of what the contingency fund is used for.
Right. It has two purposes, unanticipated expenses and tax relief. That's how you can spend the money. That's it. Those are the only two things that you can spend it for. You have to have a public hearing for both.
All right, so, Dan, did you want to say something?
Only that if a motion is made, it needs to recommend the wording be placed on the ballot for deliberative session. And if they want to have also a recommend or not recommend, it would have to include it in that respect, not just to say recommend it, because we don't have an Article 6
Okay.
yet
Okay.
until we vote on it.
Okay. Can I do both in one motion?
I think we can, but we have to create the article first.
Okay.
And then we say, and
Okay.
place
Okay.
either to recommend or to not recommend.
All right, so Dan, do you want to do that motion? If we're all good with Article
I think Ellen
6?
was chomping at it,
All right.
so we'll let her go for it.
Go ahead,
I
Ellen.
move that we, the board move Article 6 to the, to deliberative session with board recommendation.
Is that good, Dan?
It works as long as we understand it's to recommend.
Right. All right, so I have a motion by Ellen. Do I have a second? Shane, did you raise your hand?
No, but I'll second it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you
That's
raised your
okay.
hand. All right, so Shane seconded. Do I have further discussion? Jared?
Just one note, I will be voting in favor of this. I think it's important because when we do have a catastrophe, it's usually more than $600,000 where we have to actually replace it. See the asbestos in the floors that we had, a couple years ago. So I think it's good in the usage of contingency for those disasters that occur that we need to fix. So I'll be voting that we do increase it to 5%. I'll be voting to recommend.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Yep, go ahead, Shane.
I just have one final comment.
Sure.
I do feel better in recommending the 5%, in that if it does get defeated, that we default to the 2.5%.
We still have the 2.5. Yeah.
Otherwise, I may have thought different about it, but
Yep, makes sense. Thanks, Shane. Anyone else? Ginny?
Yeah, what is the amount in Article 5 that we just voted on that?
We haven't done 5 yet. We haven't
done it.
voted on 5. We were waiting to see about 6.
We didn't vote on 5.
Okay.
All right, so I have a motion, I have a second for Article 6. Go ahead, Jared.
One other thing, I think it might be important, as I understand it, and Scott will agree or disagree, I don't believe that Article 6 as presented does go to the Budget Committee. So this strictly goes from this board to deliberative session. Budget Committee is not involved with Article 6 as it's presented.
I
Correct.
concur.
yeah.
So
Yes.
just as long as we all,
Right.
if that's a determining factor,
Right.
I just want to make sure that we verbalize that as well.
We were deciding 6 so that everybody could figure out if we wanted to increase the 5, Article 5. So that's why we talked about 6 first. So we'll go back to 5 after we do our vote. So I have a motion, I have a second. We've had a lot of discussion. I'm going to do roll call. Ginny?
I'm not comfortable voting on this until we have a number on, because if we're gonna have like $1 jillion on number 5, I'm gonna vote no for this. So I'm not really ready to vote on this until I have a number on 5. Kind of.
Well, we have a motion, we have a second.
You can abstain.
You can abstain.
Well, I hate to also make our numbers screwed up for the vote. I'll just vote yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. So motion passed. So this doesn't go to the Budget Committee, Ginny, and if it gets declined, it just stays at the 2.5. So now that we know we're asking to go to 5%, what is our thought now for Article 5? Do we keep it at 200 for another year, or do we increase a little bit? Dan?
I am ready to go to either 250, or if somebody has a really good argument for 300, I can support that, but anything higher, it's gonna be really tough to get a vote in the affirmative from me.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
I'll
Scott,
move-
you had
I
your
just
hand
wanted
up.
to say that Article 6 was way more important for me in terms of the fiscal management of the school district than increasing Article 5. Because it's such a powerful tool for emergency expenditures and for trying to stabilize things. So whether you kept it at 2 or you went to 3, I would not go, I agree with Jared, I would not go higher than $300,000, because I just don't think so. Not this budget committee, I don't think it would be wise.
Yeah, I agree. Before we take motions, does anybody have comments, questions? Shane?
I kind of just want to concur. While I would like to raise it, I think that it would be prudent to either keep it at 200 or to max out around 250. Otherwise, I think we would have a really tough time with that. Just my comment.
Right, thank you, Shane. Anyone else? 200, 250? Sounds like one of those numbers. 300 might be too much this year.
After hearing the board, I think going with 200 might make sense, simply because it's what the voters have been accustomed to seeing. You're adding 6 onto the equation. If there was any nervousness, it would be less to have to deal with, because that amount is at least the same. So
Right.
that's just my take for what it's worth. And another 50,000 is not gonna put a big dent in things, so
Okay.
rather than have another issue to explain, just
Right.
keep it the same.
I'll
So
move that we
is-
go to 250.
What was that,
I'll
Alan?
move that we amend Article 5 to be the 250.
So you're saying 250, we just talked about keeping it at 200. So if somebody seconds that, I can do roll call.
No
Okay.
second? Okay.
No second. So, it sounds like everybody wants to keep it at 200 since we just increased Article 6 quite a bit. So then, if everybody's good with 200, I would need a motion to recommend Article 5 and be put to deliberative. Or do we want to still think about 5?
I can make a motion.
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
I'd like to recommend that we accept the wording of Article 5 and move it to deliberative with to recommend.
Was that a period at the end?
To recommend.
It is,
Okay.
With a vote of to recommend.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
By Shane. Any further discussion, Jared?
Yeah, as most of the board knows, I'll be voting no for this because I don't believe we should be using unassigned fund balances for these types of things. I think these should be raised by taxation. That's just my spiel. I've been consistent about that, so I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Jared. Anyone else before I do roll call? All right?
So-
Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
Jared, I'm confused. Why is this okay, but this is not?
What's okay?
6 is.
6 is okay, and,
In my opinion,
Yeah.
if I may, because I think the question's asked to me, Article 5 is to retain funds specifically for things that are part of a capital reserve fund. I do not like the term unassigned fund balance surplus available. I think unassigned fund balances that are surpluses should be returned to the taxpayers and not used for things that have not been budgeted. If we used language like we did when we purchased the property to say to be raised by taxation, I would absolutely vote in the affirmative for this. But I do not believe that we should be using forecasting errors as part of our benefit for capital reserve projects. I think those are things that should be budgeted or affirmative, voted in the affirmative by our tax body.
This says here to retain unassigned general fund.
Which one are you
balances
reading? 6?
in number 6. So I don't understand what your,
Article 6 is due to contingencies that may occur. So these are unanticipated items that can cause an earthquake. You know, we have problems that are nature-related that cause devastation to our ecosystem within the school structure. That is something that definitely, you know, the statute articulates we should be using this for. However, I do not believe, as a fiscal hawk, that we should be taking money that has not been approved for certain items and gone through line item by multiple bodies and using that over forecasted revenue in order to fund these projects. That's my opinion, and I've been consistent on this.
Thank you, Jared. Anyone else before we do roll call?
Yeah, Dan?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Boy, how do I explain the accounting concept? Because I believe whether the words in the article would say, by the way, we're gonna fund this with new taxation, but we're gonna give you the money back from the old year, so the net effect is
That's
really
right.
0.
Yeah.
And have the effect of what it is actually funding, the words are there. So I'm not swayed by the argument that the taxpayers don't get the opportunity to indicate their affirmation or denial of the use of the funds. Because either way, they're raised by taxation. One says, rather than give it back and tax you again, I'm just gonna net it out before we do the tax rate. It all comes out the same. That's my spiel.
and we're just
Thanks, Dan.
asking them if it's okay if we use that money. And if they say, yes, it is, then they're okaying that use of unanticipated funds. So it's all the same between here and there. And you guys just talked me into voting for number 6, but you're voting for no for number 5, and it's the same thing.
I fundamentally disagree. It's not the same thing, and I would say that if it's no big deal, then why don't we approve to raise by taxation so that we can have unanimous recommendation to move forward?
Anyone? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. I think we've.
Are we on Article 5?
We're on Article 5. We're on Article 5. So I am gonna do roll call since we have a motion and a second. Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
No.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. So we have 1 no and the rest yes, motion passed.
You like that fiscal hawk, huh?
All right, so that was the last of them. So then, Jared, you're able to bring this to
Yeah.
the Budget Committee?
With what's been presented, I'll bring it to Budget Committee on
On
Thursday.
Thursday, okay.
With our recommendation, and of course, as I know one member last year, I will definitely be very vigorous in defending this item for the
Thank
school
you.
board.
Heather?
We appreciate, yes, Ellen?
So we are returning about $500,000, lowering our budget due to the ending of the bond. And we're not taking any advantage of that at all.
You are.
We're just
But you are, in a way. Hold tight. Keep in mind that almost $600,000 was reduced in your budget
Yeah.
due to the principal and interest.
Right.
However, on the revenue side, we lost 270-ish in the building aid piece. So it nets out to like a $330,000 that you're not spending. But hear me out, and you are also you have a teacher's contract and, which should be the biggest thing. And so I think you're looking to, and you've also seen some other reductions in your revenue side, and you're not gonna have as robust of a unassigned fund balance to reduce taxes. So
Okay.
that, unfortunately, is kind of what's accounting for that. So this is all trying to keep the tax rate as reasonable as possible with ever-shifting revenues.
I really want the public to understand that we have the significant savings that we're using to offset what we're asking for.
Right, because I think that's a fair statement, is that
Okay.
we're trying to balance the expenses and the revenues here.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, we have new business,
Do we
so
need to move any of these others to the deliberative session?
what
Well, you
others?
don't know the budget yet, because typically you wait for the budget committee,
And
Ellen,
wait.
to decide to move theirs, and if your
Right.
numbers concur with each other, then you
Yeah.
come back at the next meeting, and that's when you recommend on the budget
And we don't have
itself.
the
You
You don't have
contracts
the
yet.
We don't have-
CBA, you don't
gotcha,
know the outcome of
gotcha.
that yet.
So what we did tonight, Jared will
Gotcha.
give to the budget committee. All right, so we have a few new reads, first reads. So, we're gonna go back to what we used to do. So tonight, we're gonna have first reads. We'll quickly go through them. The next scheduled school board meeting, December 6th, if you have questions on any of them, we'll take them at that time. And then the next board meeting, which is December 20th, is second read when we move them forward.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
So the first policy is JI and JIA. JI is student rights and responsibilities, JIA is student due process. What ended up happening is JIA is in JI, so we have no more JIA, it is all JI, you see the yellow highlighted there. JIC, JICK, this is just a review. Notice for you guys, policy reviewed it, there are absolutely no changes, so, this was what was recommended by the School Boards Association.
So do we need to
And-
reaffirm it then?
No,
Just an FYI?
it doesn't need a motion unless you guys want to
Just
change
an
anything.
FYI.
But it's just an FYI, we did review it and we didn't change anything. And then the last one is BCA, that's the ethics policy. You can see that we got, the reg is now incorporated in the BCA. We changed the top sentence, we numbered some stuff, so you could read through that. And so December 6th, if you guys have questions on any of those policies, I can take them at that time. So now, Ginny, is program of studies that everybody should have gotten. I think last week Denise sent it out, C&E.
Yes.
Yeah, was busy with that.
Okay. So, the first change was, to add flexibility, or adding an extra full credit of science elective for earth and space science by, making it open to students in grade 12. That's a change on page 6. There's an elimination of photo art and design, which is a duplication of the competencies which is in the photography.
Photography. Photography.
Whoa.
What are you drinking over there?
I think I've taken too many throat drops. My voice is back. Page 17. On page 21, the business technologies is just updating the course description. AP statistics is changed to grades 11 and 12 only. Grade 10 is removed. Probability and statistics is removed, has removed or teacher recommendation as an option instead of the prerequisite. So that's just an opposite option instead of a prerequisite. And the movement and dance company, added may be repeated for credit, and that just means they can take that course every year, and get credit for it every year. It's not the same course every year, they do a whole different program every year.
It's advancing.
They do, say, a
Okay.
different, dance, every year, different, choreography. Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Choreography.
Choreography.
It's those graphies, you know?
It is.
That discussion got me like.
Hey, Heather,
Yes, Dan?
are we gonna take questions at the end or during?
No, you can
Do you have a question?
ask them now, go ahead.
I do.
Yes,
The question was, way back on the science part.
yes.
I think it was on page 6, and I was wondering, because now I guess you don't have to take earth science and space science, but you can do another thing. There's an asterisk on starting with the class of 2026 in the book, but there's no asterisk that references it. I'm going to suggest we tie those together or remove the asterisk.
Okay,
It's page 6 of the PDF.
okay, I will speak to her about that.
Thank you, and it is correct, I don't even know space science, I didn't know we had to do that, or used to.
Yeah, half semester.
Yep. And what this does is, make the possibility of adding an extra science course to anybody who would like to take an extra science course.
Yeah.
And that's the reason behind that change. Okay. Human science, and that's just an updated course description. Psychology and sociology honors, that's an updated course description. And that's just, making the descriptions, match exactly what the course is, so that the students understand them better, in deciding whether they should take psychology or sociology. The Running Start engineering and manufacturing, is changed to grades 10 and 12, 10 through 12. Grade 9 was removed because grade 9 doesn't get college credit, so they don't want the kids to take in grade 9 because they won't get college credit and wait till later to take it, where they will have the opportunity to earn college credit. They changed Running Start Intro to Computer Repair to be a full credit course and changed the description to align with that description. The School to Career Internship was updated, the description, and changed to a full year course. And the reason for changing it to a full year course is so there can be a more full experience. The class can have a more exploratory experience, and they can move to more non-4-year college, so that they can graduate with more career-ready skills. And what she explained in that is, like, they can go to a place of business as an intern, and the business will help them with the resume and an interview and different things that they need after they get the skills, or learning about what they do in that.
What course is this, Judy?
Pardon me?
What course is this?
This is the School to Career Internship. They're making it from a half-a-year course to a full-year course, just so that it can be more full and get a better experience. Instead of just going to something, having the experience, this is going to be a really full. Anybody else have any questions on any of those things?
Oh, this is for next school year, not this year, 2022, 2023.
Right. We would like to have, bring this forth for adoption for, the year 22-23. So I'd like to move that we adopt this program of study as given.
For 2022, 2023.
22-23, yes.
Okay.
My only question is, with Dan's inquiry, does that change if we approve it now, or?
They would like this tonight.
I'm fine with approving it, but I know Dan has that question.
It's the science.
Yeah, with the asterisk, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I?
Can
have-
I was trying to find the asterisk that Dan's talking about. Dan, I'm
Page
looking.
6?
Yeah, I'm on page 6 of the current version.
This is page 6 of the PDF that was sent to me, and it's where it says science credits, and it was added underneath half credit, space science. The next sentence starts with an asterisk that says, starting with the class of 2026, comma, students may meet. It's right at the Goffstown High School graduation requirements is at the top of the page. So it's right at the beginning of the pamphlet. I believe it's right after the index or the context.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Do you see
It's
it?
It was-
Goffstown High School, right?
It's what was sent out to us.
Yeah, we got it on Wednesday, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
I'm looking at the small screen, but I'm reading what Dan's saying.
okay, let me look. Page 6. 5.
I see it on.
Oh, I see. It's in blue letters.
Yeah, to the right, it's under comments.
Yeah, do you want to,
Or it's in there.
Okay, I think maybe what they mean is
right there?
that's a requirement as of 2026, but they're starting it now.
For the science?
Yeah,
Sure, it's okay. I don't have any problem with the wording.
Yeah.
okay.
I have a problem with the reference.
Because they're
If it's
using an
a-
asterisk, and they shouldn't use
Yeah.
asterisks ever. It
Okay.
should just be like a.
Just, okay,
A statement.
It shouldn't just-
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
All right.
Why don't we recommend that, and I will just tell her to get rid of the asterisk? Is that good? Does that make everybody happy?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
I'm good
I'll
with
take
it.
care of it, Jenny.
I have
Okay.
I have a
All right.
question.
And other than that,
Well,
any
you
other-
have a motion.
Yeah, any
so
other questions?
Let me do a second. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, by Janelle. Does anybody have any questions
Yes.
for Ginny before we do roll call? Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah. In the program of studies, are we providing kids with an opportunity to explore career interests in the area of plumbing, carpentry, electrician, before they have an opportunity to go to MST? Are we providing them opportunities to see if there's an interest there? Or is it just figure it out at home and, I don't know.
We don't have.
Caleb has this.
We don't have electricity or plumbing, those are more
Right.
specialized traditionally. Usually the teachers at MST, my brother did programs there, they tend to be retired,
Yeah.
vocational themselves. We do offer wood engineering 1 and 2, which are kind of introduction, wood engineering 1 and
Okay.
2, which would kind of be that introduction to carpentry.
Carpentry?
You will get some electricity and engineering manufacturing, but not very much, and what you would be doing in computer repair is even more specialized. So short answer, not for like plumbing, HVAC, or electrician paths.
Yeah. So we're not here in the high school providing the kids with the exposure to these skills.
Well, I
see if they
think
want to.
really, it's hard for the high school to do it because we would be kind of double building here. I think we offer what MST doesn't because they can get it there and they do a much better job. I know we do a lot of the business here. I would think we're really good at business and in the arts and those kinds of things. And MST is much They offer all of the career-ready stuff.
But how do the kids know they're interested in it?
They take
I
they take
think-
it
yeah, I-
at ninth, can they start at ninth grade?
I believe they can start at
Now,
ninth
when do they
grade.
You start junior and
Yeah.
senior year.
Junior.
College
Yeah.
starts sophomore year.
And we
It's-
used to offer these things here,
We-
long
we-
time ago.
So remember, these are teachers that we can't find now. So if we thought about having an introduction to plumbing
Yeah.
teacher, there's another teacher that's we don't have the staffing, we don't have the space.
Yep.
So if you're interested in the trades, chances are that you've taken other classes or you've had other exposure. But I would say we don't have the capacity to have those intro. And some schools do kind of a combined where they have multiple different kinds of building trades all together that you can do, a small section on, being an electrician, you can do framing, you can do plumbing, you can do HVAC, you can do auto mechanics. They have like a survey class. We don't have that either.
Yeah, well, we used to have all these things in our school. We did away with them years ago, which I think was the biggest mistake high schools did. This is going back a ways, to make room for all the computer technology we brought in way back then. But we used to have all these things here, down, where am I?
Well, the
Down the hallway.
welding lab used to be automotive, but welding is in there. There's no space
Yeah.
for automotive, and
I-
the lifts were taken out.
Yeah, I just think we do our students a grave disservice not giving them the exposure to it to see if they want to follow that up for a career post-graduation.
So I don't disagree with that, Ellen, but just logistically, there are a lot of challenges with offering those programs. The state of New Hampshire doesn't provide funding, they don't provide resources. We are not a comprehensive technical high school, so we don't have a CTE center here.
Yeah.
And just speaking anecdotally, all of the students I know who have an interest in that either have a job outside of school, working in a
Working
mechanic
in
shop
the
where they
field.
can get that experience, or they do MST. Anyone I know who's interested in automotive has either worked in a mechanic shop or gone and do automotive MST. Usually they have an idea of what they're interested in by junior year, because you don't have to decide very early, and they've had time to explore that with shadow days or anything else that we offer.
Right, thank you, Caleb.
What
Shane
year-
had his hand
I'm
up.
sorry.
Hang on one second, Jenny. Go ahead, Shane.
I would just say that, in my experience, school counselors do a great job with some of that education. We don't offer classes about that, but, students meet with their school counselors, and the school counselors kind of, in my experience, again, they've done interest inventories, things like that, where if students are heading that direction, they kind of point them where they need to go.
I
So,
know they do. I just feel we do a heck of a lot for the college-bound kid, and we don't do enough here in our school for the kids not college-bound.
Right.
I'm sorry, I
No,
just,
I agree, but there are some supports in place to kind of guide those students.
Jenny,
Well-
go ahead.
Brian, what year does the internship program start? Can they do that any year?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be a way, Ellen, right there, where kids, if they thought they wanted to do something, that they could, take the internship and start something right there and see.
like, work with
do I-
an electrician, work with a
Right,
plumber.
right.
And counselors are also good about connecting students with professionals in the community, just to talk to them, maybe even get an excuse day from school to shadow them and try to figure out what they're interested in. And I think for kids who are interested in education, that's the point of the MST program, is to, we're not a technical high school, but we have a partnership with one who can offer those kinds of courses.
And the students are aware of these
Oh, yeah,
options are
we get,
available to
we're
them.
told, I knew about MST, since pretty much week one of freshman English. We get that in our English classes from the counseling department throughout all of freshman and sophomore year. And by the time it comes to junior year, we're so aware of it that anyone who's interested ends up doing it. And for kids who don't even decide until senior year, there's an option to do, you don't get the full program because there are 2-year programs in MST, but you can at least get an abbreviated version, half of the program, if you decide to do it in senior year.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you may not get like the training certificate that some of the programs
Thank
offer,
you.
but, yeah.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. We've had a lot of discussion. If no more, I'm gonna do roll call. All right, Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. Thank you,
Okay.
Ginny and Ciani. You have more?
Oh, yes, I have more.
Oh,
Also, Joyce presented for consideration signs of suicide curriculum, which is focused on suicide prevention. The suicide prevention curriculum is being presented to maintain compliance as required by SB 282, Goffstown Policy JLDBB, and the Goffstown Suicide Prevention Plan. The C&E Committee will be recommending the signs of suicide curriculum to the board for approval at our next scheduled meeting, and Joyce will be presenting. So that's something that we've taken out today because of the agenda. So she will be at a next meeting
to talk
help-
to you about,
to
okay.
speak about that.
So you don't need motion
No,
tonight?
no. I
Okay.
believe that she sent all the information to, it was a little, she wanted to be here for questions on that because it's a little more
Okay.
detailed.
So that'll come back December 6th?
Yes, I believe so, if that is what they set up with the curriculum. Also, she presented a request to the high school to adopt the biliteracy seal. And the biliteracy seal is an award that recognizes students who have achieved proficiency in English as well as one or more additional language. Whether it be a native language or an additional language learned in school or in an additional setting, it is a statement of accomplishment that helps to signal evidence of a student's readiness for career or college. And we will be recommending that at that meeting.
December 6th?
That Joyce is here as well.
Okay.
She will be presenting that, and I think we got information on that as well.
I
If you
I
didn't, we'll
don't-
be sending
I have not
that.
seen anything.
Okay. And we also did get a technology update by Stephen Bourget, and he presented his annual
Yep.
technology update.
I have that.
The presentation was mailed to everybody, and I
Yep.
know that was, because I
Yep,
did get
I
it.
have that.
As informational, the committee members thanked Stephen for his continued dedication and enthusiasm for all things technology, and we asked him to keep us appraised of the needs and accomplishment for his department. And as you can see by what he sent us for info, he continues to work very hard, and he has done very well with the two people that we gave him that supplemented the two people that he lost, and has done a lot of cool things. So we thank him for keeping on top of things and moving us along in the right direction, and he can always use more helpers.
Okay.
So,
Well said.
All right, so you're set with the program of studies, and then that was C&E
yes,
update?
we
Okay.
just needed the program of studies to be
Okay. And
they-
more to come December 6th, and hopefully we'll have information
Yes.
prior to that.
These things needed to be recommended today
Right.
because they need to go to the printer, so.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ginny.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on, school staffing. You
Two
have a sheet.
notifications, we have a leave of absence and one student teacher. Glad to see student teachers starting to come back, that's something that we have supported.
awesome.
And then for the board's approval, we have 5 middle school athletic nominations. And you can see they put a little key that several of these are new and others are listed as a transfer. I think that just means that they've coached other sports previously.
Do we have an extra sheet of paper? I didn't have that in my packet.
I got it right here.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll need a motion for the co-curricular sports nominations.
Yes, please.
So moved.
All right, so Ellen.
I'll
Shane-
second.
Shane second, Ellen made a motion to approve the co-curricular sports, Shane seconded. Do I have any other questions, discussion before I do roll call? Jared?
Just one question, are we, because we're gonna have these out there, are we gonna have transportation to support these activities?
No, not at the middle school, we're not.
Aren't these approvals for the middle school?
Yes. so they won't have transportation. We don't have any buses to provide them.
Parents have been. taking
But we're still
the
gonna have the teams?
We're still gonna have the teams,
Yeah, we're
correct?
still- yeah.
I'm
Alright.
thrilled to see that we have B coaches.
Yeah, so early.
Basketball B coaches are notoriously
Late.
among the most challenging for us to find, so I'm appreciative that they're,
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
yeah, they're out ahead of this.
Dan, did you have something to say before I do roll call?
No, I thought we were gonna start roll call, so I took myself off mute.
All right, I'm doing that right now. All right, Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes.
And Heather, yes, motion passed. All right, sir, any other business that may legally come?
I don't know if we
For the
did it or
meeting?
not. Yeah, under that, the stipend for teacher rep, isn't that still just hanging out there? Don't we need to approve that?
I wouldn't be comfortable approving it unless if we have the policy revised, as Scott had indicated earlier.
That's
in the
where it
meeting.
got hung up.
Yeah.
Policy revision.
So
Okay.
I will,
I sent that
I
to-
saw it,
I
and
sent it to
Janelle
you.
texted it to me, so I will
Okay.
look at potentially adding that to one of our agendas soon. Anything else? So we do not have non-public tonight, first time in a really long time. So our next school board meeting is December 6th, so we have some time off before our next school board meeting.
I'll give everybody an update from the budget committee.
Yes. So I
Thank
will take a motion to adjourn.
Go ahead,
So
Shane.
moved.
Okay, there you go.
By Gerald, you guys
Same
want to
as me.
stay? Do I have a second by Ginny? Roll call, Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Retta?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
And Shane?
Yes.
Oh, and Heather? Yes. Motion
forget
passed. Everybody have a wonderful, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, yeah.
Happy time off.
Come back and